Here, I hear you now. Technical problems tonight.
Yeah, I thought it was just me. Okay.
Councilmember Singleton?
Here.
And Councilmember Barrett? Here. Thank you.
Great. And we'll start off with Councilmember Behringer leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
And Councilmember Behringer, I think is also your duty tonight to help us with the invocation.
Mr. Mayor, I've invited Pastor Brian invocation this evening.
Let's pray this evening. Father, thank you for this time that we can come together to carry out business of the town. Father, we pray for these, our leaders. We pray for wisdom for them. We pray that you would just give them direction and help them in the decisions that they have to make. And Father, we thank you that you give us good gifts. You bless us. Thank you for this past year that you have blessed us with. And as we embark upon a new year, we ask that you would continue to bless, continue to guide, help us to make those good decisions. And Father, we thank you for the gift of our precious Savior. May we keep our focus upon him. And Father, we're going to thank you for all that you do in our lives and praise you for the abundance you give to us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, sir. And I have a very brief comment to make. This is the first council meeting that I've ever called to order. I came to the last one, got installed halfway through. I also want to thank all the citizens of Garner who are here. And everyone who is here tonight is a citizen. Even if you don't live in the town limits, your business owners, your partners, developers, you're all part of the Garner community. I'm very, very pleased to see you here and hope we can get your input and make some decisions for your town. We are your council. I'm absolutely your mayor. I've been asked several times in the last couple of weeks, 2 weeks on the job today, they said, well, how are you liking it so far? So, well, it kind of felt like the old man who signed up for a sleigh ride and then found out it was a rocket sled jumping the Grand Canyon. But so it's very exhilarating, very exciting, but thank goodness I've got the greatest ground crew, the greatest flight crew, the greatest rescue crew on earth between our council members and our staff and our citizens. So I think they'll get me through this. So thank you for being here. Now we'll jump right into the official program as it says on your agenda, which is the petitions and comments session. And I'm kind of obligated to read what this is. This portion of the meeting is to receive comments from the public on items that are not included in the agenda. Citizens should sign up with the town clerk to speak prior to the starting of the meeting, and the board is absolutely interested in hearing your concerns, but may not take action or deliberate on the subject matter brought up during the petitions and comments segment. Topics requiring further investigation will be referred to the appropriate town officials or staff and may be scheduled for a future agenda. And I'll ask the town clerk if anyone has signed up to speak.
Yes, sir, we did. I believe you have her information at your seat.
Yes, indeed. And we have Denise Dunn of Sausage Road. Would you step up to the podium, please, and share with us what you have? We generally try to limit to 3 minutes each, but I bet you're very concise.
Thank you. My name is Denise Dunn. I live at 5342 Jones Sausage Road. I would like to speak on the Amazon trucks, but different than what's on the agenda. Okay. We live across the street almost from the Amazon facility, and we live right next to the new, all I know to call is Greg Sandra project. So the problem is we have the Amazon trucks coming across the street and going onto this property, causing problems, ongoing, outgoing traffic, almost accidents, trucks blowing horns, and then they are parking on the no parking zone on this property, and the town has addressed that several times. I really do appreciate it. And my kitchen window faces this way. The trucks are lined up this way. and they parked for several hours, and I shouldn't have to be in my kitchen trying to make food for my family and watching these Amazon truckers that have been there for hours get out of the truck and do their business. I've brought this so that's happening again. And second thing, with the driveway where it is, right almost in front of our home, I know this is the business season, but it was happening before the business season. The trucks coming from Old Garner Road, trucks coming from Rock Crow Road, and they're backing up traffic. And when they are backing up traffic trying to go into the Amazon plant, people are going around, and that's been causing problems and backups. I've already been hit by a FedEx truck and knocked all the way across the road because the traffic is going too fast, nobody's paying attention. And then at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, we're hearing the bumps from these big trucks when they turn into the Amazon property. They're blowing the horns. I brought all this to the council before, I understand progress, but I don't feel our family should be victims of the progress. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dunn. I certainly understand your concerns. That's a disruption to your life, isn't it?
Yes.
Indeed. Well, we'll certainly see what the council can do to look into this, see what solutions we might can come up with.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. And that concludes the petitions and comments section. Okay, we now move to adoption of tonight's agenda, and I'll ask the council members for a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Councilperson Behringer made the motion. It's seconded by Council Member Singleton, and all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying nay. Sounds like it passes, and so we will go with this agenda. Okay, we'll start with the presentation tonight, a very interesting one, I think, and we're going to have David Beck, our finance director, to introduce the presenter and give us a little preview.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening to you and council. So we are going to present the FY 22-23 audit for you tonight. Wanted to make a few comments before we bring up Mr. Tim Lyons to that presentation. We're a little bit out of kilter with how we would normally do this process. We hit a few unexpected delays during the course of the audit work. Through no fault of the auditors, but it was things that were somewhat beyond our control on our side, on the town side. So we have the audit is wrapped up, but we don't have the normal bound copies of the report that we would present to you tonight. So we will distribute those later. We'll have a bound copy for you. We'll also have an electronic copy that will get to everyone. And so if there are any additional questions, anything you'd like to have clarified after you have the full report in your hands, we'll be glad to come back and address those at a later date. But we had this date tonight penciled in for the presentation and wanted to stick to that since we knew it was going to be another month before council was together for a meeting. I would like to publicly thank my staff in the finance department for their hard work on the audit. It's a process that takes many months to complete, a lot of work from a lot of different people. Also very appreciative of the good work that our other town departments do and town staff all across the whole town. It's very helpful that they adhere to the policies and procedures we have in place to ensure that our books are in good order when it comes time to be audited. One other additional thing that we'll need to take care of tonight along with the presentation is, because of those delays that I mentioned, we're going to have to do an amended audit contract to extend that by 30 days. So the mayor will have to sign off on that, but I wanted to get consensus from council on that as far as agreement on moving forward with the amended contract. by state statute, if we don't have the contract submitted by December 1st, an amended contract is required. So we were going to extend the current contract through December 31st to allow time to finish up the final, formatting edits and things like that we need to do to get the report in a presentable format.
Yes, and David, I understand that's kind of a technical correction to allow more time to wrap it up, as you said. And we don't have to take an actual vote, but I'll just ask, do we have a consensus? Do we have a consensus on that? I see thumbs up and head shaking, so looks like consensus to me.
Thank you very much. So I will ask Mr. Tim Lyons to come forward at this time. He is a partner with our audit CPA firm of Malden and Jenkins. Tim's traveled up from South Carolina this evening to be with us, and appreciative of Tim and his staff. There's a number of folks that work on our engagement, and they're always very helpful and very knowledgeable, and I think they've done a thorough job on auditing the town's books. So at this time, I will turn it over to him to go through his presentation.
Great. Thank y'all for having me here tonight. If you want to click forward to the next slide, just briefly, just a brief agenda about the slides I'm going to go over tonight. The results of the audit, as David mentioned, while we do not have a physical document to present to you tonight, the audit is complete. We have rendered our opinion on the financial statements. We have a report date of December the 15th. So we are finished. We have a few, within that results of the audit, there's a few slides in there that are known as our required communications. We'll go over those. We've got a couple slides on just some financial trends, just some high-level highlights that I think are important for the council to see, and then a few comments, recommendations, and other items as we kind of wrap up. So as David mentioned, my name is Tim Lyons. I do serve as the engagement partner on the town's audit, which means that I'm responsible for overseeing our staff, for reviewing the work papers, and ultimately for signing off on our audit report. Brian Nicholson is another partner in my office, and every single one of our audits goes through what we refer to as an engagement quality control review process. So we have another partner who is completely independent of our audit process, who has nothing to do with the town's audit, but who specializes in governmental audits. We have another one of those partners review our audit to make sure that we've done everything that we need to do. And he signed off on everything on Friday, which is why we have a report date of December the 15th. This slide here kind of goes over what the overall results of the audit is. That first big bullet point kind of lays out the importance, kind of the distinction between what is our responsibility, what is the town's responsibility. The financial statements are the responsibility of the town's management, and our responsibility is to audit them and to express an opinion on them. We have rendered an opinion. That opinion is unmodified, which is a fancy accounting auditing term for a clean opinion. There is no higher or better opinion. So what that means is in the town's financial statements, the clean opinion says that the town's financial position as of June the 30th of 2023 is considered to be materially correct, in addition to the results of its operations and the two budget schedules that are part of the basic financial statements. We also, in conducting the town's audit this year, were required to issue 2 additional reports. That first one is a report on internal controls over financial reporting and on compliance and other matters in accordance with government auditing standards. We had no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in internal control, and no instances of material noncompliance, no findings, as you may have been accustomed to hearing that referred to before. So a clean opinion in our government auditing standards report as well. The last report, the third report, is what is known as the single audit report. In North Carolina, the single audit report can actually be 2 different reports depending upon what the composition of the government's federal and state expenditures are. This year, we did not have to audit any state programs. The town's total expenditures of state awards that are included in the state's Single Audit Implementation Act did not exceed $500,000. So when that happens, when they're not above $500,000, we actually do not have to conduct a state single audit. We had one major program that we audited, which was a federal program this year, the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds, or as I'm sure you all are much more accustomed to referring to them as ARPA, or hearing about ARPA funds. This year, the town's CFSA, the Schedule of Expenditures of Federal and State Awards, reports the town's spending of $10 million of those ARPA funds this year. Those funds were transferred from the ARPA fund into the town's general fund to support general government services, as was allowed by the ARPA program. Those funds were used to pay public safety, public works, and other costs of the town. We had an unmodified, clean opinion on the one major federal program, and we had no internal control issues in internal controls over compliance. The next are what are known as our required communications. These are things that we are required by the audit standards to submit to you all in writing, and I have done so. And so I'm not going to go through and read each one of these, but I do think that there are a couple of these that are important enough to point out. Underneath that first item that says significant accounting policies, the fourth bullet there about new accounting standards. If you are someone that perhaps pulls out the current year statements once you get them and the prior year ones and kind of flips through each one and looks to see what's changed, you will notice a new item in there known as a subscription-based information technology arrangement, or a SBITA. The town, along with all other state and local governments, was required to implement this new standard during fiscal year 2023. This standard changes the way that governments account for subscription-based IT arrangements. Those agreements where we've signed a long-term contract through some sort of a subscription with regard to IT arrangements. In the past, when we would make our payments related to the agreements, those payments would just flow through the operating statement, would just flow through the income statement as an expense. Now we have to follow what is kind of known as lease accounting, where we have to look at the total payments that are going to be made over the life of the contract, and we come up with a calculation of a right-to-use subscription asset that we then amortize over the life of the contract, like any other capital asset that we capitalize and depreciate, and then we offset that with a liability. And so as we make our payments, rather than them flowing through the income statement, we're reducing that liability each year. It's kind of a weird concept, but it is new this year. So, and as David mentioned, if you have any follow-up questions or want to talk with me about that, I'm happy to spend hours talking about governmental accounting with you, but I know that's not what you want me to do tonight. On the next slide, the relationship with management. I do think it is important for those charged with governance to hear from the auditor about our relationship with management throughout the conduct of the audit. As David mentioned, we ask for a lot of information. We ask for access to a lot of people within the town's operating structure. Lots of questions, lots of inquiries, lots of documentation. We had full cooperation from the town's management. At no point in time did we feel like we weren't getting what we needed to do our work and to complete the audit. On the next slide, the last one on the bottom here has to do with independence. In accordance with our professional standards, we are considered to be independent of the town. In addition, we are not only required to follow AICPA standards in conducting this audit, but because of the federal and state money involved, we are required to follow the independence rules as promulgated by government auditing standards, which are even more stringent than our just AICPA professional standards. And so we had no issues that might impair our independence, and thus we can render an opinion on the town's financial statements. A couple slides on the town's main operating fund, the general fund. This slide here shows the town's fund balance categories in the general fund and how they've changed over the last 5 years. The biggest change from 22 to 23 is there was a big increase in fund balance overall in the town's general fund. We'll see that on the next slide, but on this slide here, a big increase. The majority of that increase has to do with the fact of that $10 million transfer from the ARPA fund into the general fund, and both in the unassigned category, which is the fund balance that is available for the town to use in future spending, but also in the committed fund balance, that green bar, which is where the town council has made decisions and committed to fund certain projects in the future. That fund balance is kind of set aside and will be used by the town in future years. This slide here, this is a slide that we like to present because we refer to this as leverage. You know, in the government environment, one of the things that can be a little bit challenging is that revenues typically aren't just consistent month to month all throughout the year. Certain revenue streams come in all at one time, and so we have to be able to have some fund balance to make sure that we can withstand those timing delays, or else we have to rely on things like short-term financing and whatever else to continue to operate consistently over the course of the year, because as we all know, expenditures are pretty much the same every single month. This looks here at total fund balance compared to total expenditures. And what we're looking at is if we start to see a trend where these two lines start to grow apart, where we can see there's less and less of the ability for the town to absorb any sort of a timing change in its revenues. And as we can see here, that is not the case. They're actually growing closer together. At the end of 2023, approximately 35% of the town's annual general fund expenditures were in fund balance. I know the town has a policy of 30%. GFOA recommends best practices 3 to 4 months in fund balance. The town is well within both its internal policies and with external best practices. Just a couple brief comments here. Where this has been included mostly is just information, but just in keeping folks aware. We get 1 year off from having to implement any new accounting standards. I know David and his staff are excited about that. But in 2025, we will have a new standard about compensated absences. This is going to change the way we account for and report accrued leave. Essentially, the idea of vesting is no longer a thing. We have to go through some different calculations and some trend analysis to make sure that liability is being accounted for correctly. So that'll be not in next year's report, but in the report for the fiscal year ending June 30th of 2025. And then last but not least, Mr. Mayor, this is my first time presenting in front of you, but just to remind the council, we do offer free quarterly continuing education for all of our governmental clients. If any of you all are interested in being on our email distribution list, certainly get your name and contact information to David, and I can make sure that it is included in our emails that go out to everybody. Again, we do that quarterly. With that, I'm happy to take any comments or questions from you all tonight.
Yes, and let's ask the council members. We'll start with Mr. Matthews and work this way. Any observations, comments, or questions that you might have?
No, Mr. Mayor, great presentation, and appreciate what y'all do and keeping us where we need to be.
Mr. Singleton.
Thanks for your presentation and for taking the time to come up here and be here with us.
Of course, thank you.
Yes, Ms. Behringer.
And I would say the same. Very good presentation. Thank you.
Mr. Dellinger.
Yes, thanks for the information and look forward to seeing the paper version.
Yeah.
Yes, and Mr. Vance.
First, let me apologize for being here tonight, but to the council and also to the audience. I have no questions at this time. Thank you for the presentation.
And I do just have one comment, Mr. Lyons, and that is, I noticed your two junior trainees were fact-checking you on their computers consistently, and they didn't raise any objections, so I assume they're okay with it too.
I appreciate that. I appreciate y'all having them here tonight to kind of witness what a local government public meeting looks like in person. And so appreciate y'all having us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we come to the consent agenda, a number of items that have been pre-reviewed and look pretty routine here. And I just wanted to see if no council member has an objection to the consent agenda. Is there any discussion of the consent agenda or any items that need to be changed? I'm getting those. Okay, that's a good sign because this should be pretty routine stuff.
Mayor, I move we approve consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Singleton and seconded by Mr. Vance, I think it was.
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you. All in favor of adopting the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Thank you. We can move right along, skip several pages here, and jump to the public hearings. Okay. Now, I do want to point out that these public hearings on the agenda are legislative hearings, which do not require sworn testimony. We're so used to the old, the other type of hearings, but these are not quite as formal. Persons interested in speaking, including the applicant, must sign up with the clerk, and I think we've had some people sign up this evening. Town staff will present a report, followed by the applicant, and then persons supporting or opposing the application will be recognized to speak. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Ms. Ashley Harris in our planning department, who can give us an overview of the project here.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. This is the continuation of the public hearing for Vintage Garner, CZ MP 2214. Because this has come before you previously, I'm going to go through the slides a little bit quicker than usual, but if you have any questions, I'll be happy to stop and answer any of those. General case information: the applicant is Tom Johnson of Williams & Mullen. The owners of the property are the Lee and Hudgens Enterprises, LLC, and it's approximately 43.26 acres along Fayetteville Road. This is the Tier 2 Master Sketch Plan and Written Conditions. The site is located just south of Farm Road and the corner of Farm, Fayetteville, and Old Stage Roads. Here is a photo of what the site looks like currently. Adjacent zoning is a majority of commercial mixed use, light industrial, and residential. And there is a recent zoning history provided for you in your staff report. The existing zoning is a combination of light industrial and rural agricultural, which allows for a limited range of low-intensity industrial uses and some large lot single-family developments. It also is located within the Commercial Highway Overlay District, which provides some guidelines on how to develop along some transportation corridors. None of the prohibited uses are included for proposed inclusion with this proposal. The zoning conditions have not changed since you saw this project previously. There's still a number of proposed conditions, including residential uses, civic and institutional uses, commercial, office, and retail services, recreation and entertainment, industrial, manufacturing, warehousing, just including that brewery use there, and then some utilities. Again, the conditions have not changed, so I won't go through these, but they are provided for you in your staff report. There are they've proposed for a total of 16. Overall neighborhood character is a mix of residential, light industrial, and highway-oriented development. It's heavily influenced by US 401 as the primary traffic facility, and this project will have frontage on Fayetteville Road and Farm Road. Traffic counts have been provided going back to 2011. And CIA was completed with this project as well. The applicant did 2 neighborhood meetings, the first in October 2022 and the second in April of this year. So this project came before you for the first time in October for a public hearing. I did my best to summarize what the discussion was. The biggest points were clarifying the location of the driveways off of Farm Road, clarifying building height maximums, and receiving verbal commitment from the applicant that they would be 4-story elevated apartment buildings, asking if any of the units would be designated for workforce housing, clarifying if this falls within the critical Swift Creek watershed area, commenting that other projects recently have committed to 100-year stormwater capture, questioning the sizes and nature of the amenity and open spaces, requesting specifically a large open green space for children to play, commenting on an appreciation for the inclusion of commercial, questioning if the commercial area meets the intent of the Garner Forward Comprehensive Plan, questioning on the process for parking reductions, and clarifying the proposed phasing and property lines shown on the plan. This was voted to be continued to a date specific in November. At that time, the applicant requested to be continued to tonight's meeting. So as I said, it's approximately 43.26 acres. Of that, 37 would be the residential and 6 would be commercial. That comes out to about 654 units of the multifamily and 40,000 square feet of commercial. The lots and setbacks have not changed. There's specific setbacks for residential structures and non-residential structures in the commercial mixed-use district. Project master plan, the majority of the changes are centered around this large open space where you can see they've added a play park and a playground, as well as keeping a dog park here. And then also a major change is the driveway access along Fayetteville Road here has been removed. The applicant has provided some renderings of what they predict the site will look like. The tree canopy cover will be a sliding scale of 18 to 20% to be met, with all of that 20% of preservations. There will be perimeter buffers along the southern property line and then street buffers along the Farm Road and US 401 frontage. Street trees would be provided, 1 per every 40 feet. So the applicant did provide some updated open space calculations. So the total open space planned is 14%. Of that, active open space would be 2.24 acres. And the open space areas would be maintained by a property manager and would be met through a combination of qualifying conservation areas and recreation space. Recreation space would consist of a minimum 0.16 acre dog park, 2.75 acre pools and associated amenities, 1.58 acre parklet including a 150 foot by 60 foot open play field, playground, and dog park, private trails, and a public plaza in the commercial area. The applicant did provide some renderings for that as well, and an exhibit showing where those open spaces would be located on site and the acreages for each. There are FEMA designated floodplains and associated 50-foot buffer. All of those are contained to the area adjacent to the railroad and reserved for stormwater management. The site will be serviced by city water and sewer. And at preliminary plat, staff will review lighting requirements, stormwater requirements, utilities, and landscaping and parking as well. The next step would be for this to go to Planning Commission for their determination of plan consistency. Currently corridor commercial, while also being on the edge of a mixed use and commercial focus area of change. And then it will come back to you again for your final vote and determination of reasonableness. So for tonight, we recommend that once you have heard comments, concerns, and questions, that the case be referred to Planning Commission for their review. And the applicant is here as well with a presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Harris. Let's hang on a second and see if any of the council members have a question at this point. We'll have another opportunity after we hear from the applicant and other interested parties. And we'll start with Mr. Vance. Do you have any questions at this time for Ms. Harris?
Yes, point of clarification for myself and the audience in reference to the rezoning from light industrial. This is rezoning from light industrial to commercial mixed use.
Yes.
Next question is, what are the uses of the properties adjacent to this current one?
If I go back to this slide, a majority of it is industrial. There is some residential. So to the north is a residential and a mini storage facility. Sorry, let me make this full. To the south is industrial uses. I believe there's some different car-based businesses there. To the east is a convenience store with fuel sales and vacant, and then on the west of the railroad tracks by that RA portion of the site, that's Wake County property, and it's shown as a landfill in the tax records.
Okay, can you point for clarification to the residential location?
So I believe there's some residential in this area with the brown. It's a combination of mobile homes and some other existing non-conforming thing there.
Thank you. That's all the question I have.
Thank you. Mr. Dellinger?
No questions at this time.
Ms. Behringer? Mr. Singleton?
And the residential properties that Ms. Harris was pointing out are some older properties that have been there for many years, and some of the property behind it's never been developed. It's just been zoned. It was all Wake County zoning because it was in Wake County for years and years and years. And then, of course, right above it is all light industrial. So light industrial surrounds this property pretty well. So thank you for the information.
Mr. Matthews?
No questions this time.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ms. Harris. And you will yield the floor, I think, to the applicant. And the applicant is represented here tonight. Would you mind introducing yourself, please?
I'm Tom Johnson with the law firm of Williams Mullen at 301 Fayetteville Street, Suite 1700 in Raleigh, here on behalf of the applicant. Of course, we had the hearing before, and Ms. Harris did a great job summarizing where we were. And I want to go over a few things and a few adjustments we made based upon the input we had at the last hearing. As she mentioned, we revised the site plan. We eliminated a driveway on 401, which DOT wanted us to do. The other driveway we did leave in place, so we've eliminated one. We're working with DOT to refine some of the requirements of the TIA because the original TIA we did had a lot more retail projected than what we ended up with. So there will be some changes in those TIA conditions. We also heard you in terms of the open space, so we made adjustments on the site plan to have a large central open space area and playground. And as a result, we did have to adjust some of the parking around, but falls well within the parking study we've had done so far as having sufficient parking, plus the shared parking agreement we will have with the retail, which is provided under the ordinance. This highlights the open space. The active open space is in the lighter green color. The passive open space is in the little darker green color. The central area, the central rectangle is this central park area that we discussed. Then I know Councilmember Singleton was concerned about last time that there'd be some open field space, and we accommodated that by putting that in the central area. And of course, to the left on the other side of the railroad, that will be undisturbed, but a part of the open space in the project as well. This is a rendering just showing that central open space. You can see it between the apartment buildings right there. This is more of a large overview. This is a little more focused or zoomed in on that area where you could have playground equipment, open space for children and others to play and enjoy the outdoors. And this is even a further zoomed in view. In addition to the rectangular area in the middle, there's some other open space areas around the buildings that are available to the residents. And this brings it back to the overall view that I think Ms. Harris showed in her presentation, the rendering we provided last time. We have confirmed these buildings will be 4-story buildings. No question about that. This is not in the critical Swift Creek watershed. So it is not in the critical portion of the Swift Creek watershed at all. And that's been confirmed as well. Obviously, the same as we discussed before with the retail on the front, the multifamily in the back. The retail's somewhat flexible because we don't know what tenants will come, but it's flexible enough that we can accommodate some pretty large and significant tenants. And it'll be along Highway 401 with access in and out for that, as well as access for the residents. And we have kind of a central pedestrian related mall area in the middle where we have some traffic calming features and things to make it pedestrian friendly. I'm happy to answer any further questions council may have based upon the adjustments we made from last time. I'm happy to answer those questions, and I've got my team available too if there are any technical questions that we need to answer.
Okay, let's start with Mr. Matthews.
Just a couple of comments. I like the retail on the frontage of 401 and very familiar with this area, and I think everybody up here is. And it's a good-looking project. We're kind of, as I look at this, we're kind of moving into that. There's a place over in Cary there. What do you call it?
You're talking about
Fenton, like Fenton. Yeah, we're kind of moving in that top area, and that's what we're looking to see. So Mayor likes to say, let's move it up and make it a nicer facility, and I think you guys are moving on it here, and be interesting what restaurants and facilities come in, because that is a primo location for retail right on that corner there. So y'all have done what we've asked you to do, and just speaking to me, I like what we're seeing here. This is going in the right direction here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Singleton.
Just remember, these are sampling elevations. This is not what they said is coming.
Well, I thoroughly understand that.
Elevation.
I thoroughly understand that.
Mr. Johnson, you mentioned that on 401 you took out one driveway because of reduced commercial square footage. So what is the approximate?
It wasn't because of we took the driveway out, not necessarily because of reduced square footage, but DOT only wanted us to have Farm Road and the one other entrance. Some of the TIA conditions are being reduced because of reduced square footage. Initially, we thought about, well, would we have this space for a grocery store at this location? But given the restrictions of the improvements to 401, this is not as attractive to a grocer because you don't have the in and out accessibility that you would otherwise. So we're making some adjustments in the TIA conditions based upon that with DOT. I can have our traffic engineer specifically talk about those, but that's what that is all about.
And you're these movements are based on when they start this super street or whatever they call it now process, where they'll all have to turn right and go make the loop.
Correct. And we're coordinating with all of that in what we're doing.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Absolutely.
Hey, Ms. Behringer.
Yes, could you elaborate a little bit about your traffic calming measures as it relates to that open space island?
Well, we're putting, actually, I'm going to get one of our folks to come in and just talk about that, because I think that helps. Ken, if you could come up. I'm going to have Ken Thompson, who's the architect on the project, just share some of the things we did.
Fortunately, I don't think we have a graphic that illustrates it, but the primary street there is to be a pedestrian-orientated street. There's going to be some raised crosswalks, difference in materials at those crosswalks. And at the area between the retail and the residential, there's a plaza area that can be utilized by both residents and the retail people.
It concerns me a bit to see parking spaces on either side of the open space, because children don't pay a lot of attention. And we wouldn't want to see anybody get hurt from not having traffic calming measures in that area that would at least alert the drivers, because as we know, kids, you can't depend on what they're going to do.
Yeah, and the play areas would be fenced as well, too.
Oh, good, okay. I didn't see that on the list. Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Dellinger.
Public interest question. I've been asked this question. How is this project related to the 401 crossing project? I've heard that there are some level of in relationship between the two, some similar stakeholders.
There's no relationship.
At all?
At all.
Okay. That's what I'm...
Complete.
There's some concern just over the use, looking at a land use map and looking of commercial and industrial, and then sort of goes back to very specific guidance our Garner Forward Plan is trying to make on tax base, financial sustainability. And so I'm kind of, I have a lot of unease around projects we don't have information on. Is it going to be revenue positive for the town? And so that's internal work we have to do, but it also is sort of a fiscal. I mean, we were just looking at our audit, and it said these things aren't going apart, but 10 million of that was ARP money. And so, you know, I think it's really part of the calculus. We need to start looking at our land use and seeing is this the right project for this spot, or is there a commercial use, or, you know, so I've got a lot of fiscal reservations. Floodplain, the 100-year flood containment. I'm gonna have some conversations with staff on that just generally, because those events are coming more and more frequently, regardless of being in watershed or not. So, well, I don't have any specific questions.
Well, as I understand it from our engineer, is a pretty major drainage way on there at the railroad track. And so if you detain too much water, it actually does the opposite. It prevents it from flowing as well. And there's a lot of the upper area above north of this drains into there. So that's not necessarily, as I understand it, the solution that would be, you know, is just to add more storage, because that can sometimes work to the contrary. In terms of tax base, I mean, this will add retail, which obviously includes sales taxes, the property taxes based upon the improvements that are being made here, both for retail and for the apartments. There will be a significant increase of the tax base for Garner. The residents here will be residents that will tend to spend and seek their services in Garner, so therefore they're contributing to the sales tax revenue by staying in the area and spending locally. And that's the whole idea behind having the retail up front in front of a ready customer base in the apartments. They can use the retail, the restaurants that are there without having to travel for those. Therefore, that helps reduce traffic congestion. So they, you know, come home from work and they don't have to go anywhere. They just walk down the street. So that's the whole idea. That's a positive, very positive impact. Plus, on top of all of that, it offers housing for residents of the area, and those residents end up living in Garner as opposed to somewhere else.
One quick comment.
Sure.
All correct.
Right.
But it's all relative to what other uses. And so I'm not disputing what you're saying.
Right.
There could be a higher and better use for the town from a financial standpoint and tax-based standpoint. Any improvement that goes there is going to be an improvement in the tax base. But is it positive for us or not? It's not really clear. There was a mention on the previous slide about workforce housing. What has been any progress or discussion or proposal on your part to address that critical need when you're bringing this housing?
This really isn't the type of project that really fits with workforce housing, especially it doesn't have as readily the public transportation aspect to it that's available here and other things in terms of the design of the project. So there's not intended to be a specific workforce housing aspect of this project or a specific commitment. Now, that said, this will be market rate, but it'll be market rate along the lines that it will be readily available to folks that work in the community. And some previous studies, and I've not seen it with this one, but previous apartments that I've come before you and had approved here in Garner, the studies we go back after the fact and look at, it may be, a couple of school teachers, a couple that are both school teachers, they're living in these types of apartment complexes, or those that work in health care. So often both parties work. So this is not out of the realm of those folks being able to afford it. And those are our first responders, our healthcare workers, our teachers, and the demographics have shown that in previous projects that we've come before you and had approved. So, I can reassure you in that sense that it has worked.
I'll be reaching out to you to get some of that information. It's very interesting data.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I will say it's several years old, but when I look back at some of those we had approved, it had those demographics, and I can pull that together from what I had before.
I'll reach out to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dellinger. Excellent observations. Mr. Vance?
No questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And we'll move ahead to recognize the individuals who have signed up to speak tonight. Have we got several of those? If you would just raise your hands if you signed up to speak. So we've only got a couple of folks. Okay. Is one for and against? Both for? Who's for? Against. Okay. Well, let's take the one who signed up first as our first speaker. And Town Clerk Gibson, who would that be?
Katie Cardenas.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Katie Cardenas, 1609 South Wade Avenue, Garner. I had two issues, but now I have a third from the presentation. It's being related to Fenton in Cary, so I'm wondering if that public area is going to be, or if that park area and those green areas are going to be open to the public, as Fenton has more of a community, everything is open. Related to that, if it is a destination location, that's going to increase transportation. And I was speaking recently with one of the council members about the problem that we have with public transportation, that even our only bus that goes through Garner only is available 5 days a week. On 401, the only bus we have is the express that goes down to Wake Tech. So we do not have transportation to help alleviate the traffic that's going to be added by this, especially if it becomes a destination park. And then, as Mr. Dellinger pointed out, workforce housing was kind of not even mentioned until he asked the question. And although a family could maybe be a teacher or a firefighter, it does not mean that they can afford it. It might mean that their family can afford it. And we definitely have an increased number of people that are facing housing insecurity because the prices are going up so high. So I just want to read to you from page 66 of the Garner Forward Plan. At the bottom, it says on page 66, one area of concern to Garner leaders is the availability of workforce housing, housing that is affordable for households with an income that is insufficient to secure quality housing within a reasonable proximity to a workplace. A lack of workforce housing affects a town's teachers, librarians, police officers, firefighters, and other employees, and it is crucial to bring attention to the lack of housing for these local professionals. The provision of workforce housing is essential to building a strong community. So I hope we can consider transportation, workforce housing, and how we're presenting images and focusing on those. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the comments. And I think we have another speaker signed up. Was there another speaker signed up?
Tyler, and I'm sorry, but I can't.
I'm the applicant.
Oh, okay. So we have Dwayne Daughtry.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and Town Council. It doesn't matter how many times I stand up at a podium, I still get nervous. It's all right.
Well, welcome to the club.
Well, that's great. My name is Dwayne Daughtry, and I live at 4832 Fayetteville Road. If the Garner Police doesn't know me by now, I'm the one taking off at 102 miles an hour from my driveway to get onto 401 because it is so busy. I also manage all the I manage all the properties on Kitchen Drive and Rupert Road. Those are all of our properties. And because of development and because of the super street and so forth, I've got tenants wanting to leave that have been there for a long time. I grew up in Garner, left for 26 years in the military, came back, and all this is built. And I'm not against progress. And this is an amazing place next door to my property, next door to my house that I grew up in. The one thing that kind of gets me is, while I appreciate the developer and the attorney they're doing their job. But as a citizen, I have to do my job to my community. And I have to talk to you by saying, the Mona Lisa is a wonderful wonderful thing to see when you go to the Louvre. But go stand in line at the Louvre, and you can see how long it takes you to go see one beautiful place. And the first thing I'm thinking of is Farm Road. That's a dead-end road for about 800 and some odd people getting ready to move into an apartment complex that's 4 stories high on a major intersection between Old Stage Road and 401. Would be thinking about bringing business and residents to Garner where the traffic is flowing into Garner. But instead, everything going out of that complex has to basically turn right toward Fuquay, away from Garner, unless you want all your businesses to be in Costco or those 4 businesses that are there. And how long are they going to stay until they say, I've had enough? I'm not against the project altogether. I'd like to see things grow in Garner because I think we deserve it. I think Garner deserves it. But I would like to pump the brakes a little bit because I'm thinking how many cars are going to be backed up on Farm Road or going through Ernest Myatt Church, which is a daycare center, by the way. What's traffic calming through there in that daycare center? What's traffic calming going for all those cars that are racing through Raleigh, going through that brief part of Garner, and then going into the county once they cross into my area? There's a running joke in my neighborhood that if you're going to have an accident in front of my house, drag the body over to the Popeyes. Because the response time for Garner is very good if they're visible. Response time for the highway patrol to get to my house, 50 minutes. Sheriff's Department with a serious gun crime, 20 minutes. Now, I'm not here to blame that, but this place hasn't been annexed into Garner yet. And when it is, it still is going to have some growing pains. 8 people have died between Mechanical Boulevard and Old Stage Road just this year alone. 2 have died in my arms, pedestrians. How many more? Garner, how many more? Had 2 tours in Iraq
Shouldn't see that in my own neighborhood. That's memories that are really hard that I don't want to see for the town of Garner or kids or children, Fred A. Smith, anyone else. A bus stop would be helpful if we put that in the plan. I don't see that. This super street ain't that super. All your businesses are getting ready to leave and go toward Fuquay or go toward 540. They're not coming back the other way toward Garner. There's no way that they can get across Farm Road into Farm Road, turn at the, what's it called, the Grovemont, go on down, hit Timber that way. How many cars are you going to actually exploit in that area? The traffic is really horrible. You got a hard job. Again, I'm not against the project entirely, but I'd like to pump the brakes on it and say, really think about not only the kids in the neighborhood, but think about those 600 and some odd cars plus 1,200 cars. You got to consider 2 per family going through a neighborhood, going through a part of our history. How many more people got to die around that area before we start really expanding Farm Road to connect with Lake Wheeler Road? Those I would like to see in our community. Work with Raleigh, work with the county, work with us. We own the property. We'll be more than happy. Let the developers work with us. Never had a phone ring, never got a letter. I found this out by accident. I'm your neighbor. I'm proud to be from Garner, and hope you just really put brakes on this one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daltrey. Very, very moving information that you got there. We're going to close the public hearing at this point. I just want to remind everyone, this is the very first step. This is the first public hearing that's been held. There have been neighborhood meetings. There's been interaction with staff. The question before the council tonight is, do we refer this on to the Planning Commission for further review, more public input, and those who have spoken tonight describing the project and those who have concerns about the project, I hope you will follow up and participate in the Planning Commission in more detail and work through some of the issues that come with any change, any new project. A lot of things to be considered. So thank you for your interest. Thank you for committing to move ahead. And if it goes to the Planning Commission, to be part of their process as well. So with that, I'm going to ask if there's any other comments or questions from council members before we ask for a vote about referring this on to the Planning Commission. I'll look down towards Mr. Vance. Any further questions before we?
No further questions at this time.
Okay, Mr. Dellinger.
No further questions, just a kind of a comment on land use and zoning, and it's kind of repeatedly brought up about Hunter's Mark and what a mistake that was to rezone that in the middle of all this light industrial. And when I'm looking at the map, the zoning map, it's really hard to see how this area will develop without sacrificing some significant commercial activity or changes. So that's kind of a concern, to have this sort of pocket of dense residential in the midst of all this sort of commercial. I know there's the mobile homes in your area over there and neighborhood over there, but I'm just have some concerns on location and land use.
Thank you. Good observation. Ms. Behringer? Mr. Singleton?
As I point out, when you look at the zone map and you look at the colors, and the light industrials in purple and the CMX is in reddish, this is the largest light industrial site over there. If you look at everything south of it, it engulfs the next group. Almost the 46 acres is a similar size. So, we just met with our economic development director, Nate Grover, about economic development projects that are looking at Garner, and we're being asked to take light industrial zoning and back it down to have a mixture use with residential. So I think that's a high concern. Mr. Dillinger mentioned the Hunter's Mark. I was a part of that we approved years ago, and this wonderful subdivision out there. Hindsight being 2020, we shouldn't have put a residential subdivision out there, that industrial corridor, but we did because we had no residential projects
a year before that and a year after that, and we did it, and you have to stick by that because it's done. So you stick residential right directly beside light industrial warehouses that have been there, some of them for several years or many years. So this is a zoning issue that is important because we don't have so much light industrial and other industrial and commercial acreage in Garner. And if you eliminate one, you're not going to go to residential and change that to light industrial unless you acquire a tremendous amount of property. So it's a really unusual project because it's so new around so many older houses in that area, single family homes that people have had for years. But the concern for me is the light industrial and taking that away and not having a commercial 46 acres with the possibility of development sometime, whether it's in the near future or the distant future, I'm sorry, not the far future. So that's a big concern. They've looked at some of the things, the concerns we mentioned and brought them forward, and I appreciate them doing that. But the zoning is a real, look at us. Don't make the mistake we made on Jones Sausage Road. And I'm saying that the Hunter Marks folks is a mistake because it's so wonderful people live there. I'm saying we the ones that put it out there and then it started developing. So we're the ones that made the mistake, me being one of them. I mean, had a very wise person that many in here knew, named Mary Lou Todd, tell me more than once, son, you better be careful what you're thinking about doing. She told me that more than once, and guess what? She was right. Anyway, I'll be quiet after that.
Well, that was an excellent historical perspective with real questions that need to be addressed. Mr. Matthews?
No more questions.
Okay. At this point, I'm going to call for a vote to move this on to the Planning Commission for further review and details, and perhaps to address some of the issues here. So, is there a motion to move this on to the Planning Commission?
So
Ms. Behringer, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Matthews seconds. So all in favor of referring this on for further consideration to the Planning Commission signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed by no?
No.
And we have one no, and 4 in favor. The motion passes to move along to the Planning Commission. Thanks to everyone who was involved. Very thoughtful, important input on this. Thank you very much. So that closes the public hearing on that one. And we'll move ahead to the zoning text amendment for technical corrections. Our presenter is Mr. Jeff Triesenberg, our planning director.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. We're bringing forward for a public hearing here tonight, ZTA 2304, tweak the title there to be technical corrections. And this was presented to you at your work session on October 30th. So I don't plan on necessarily going through all the details unless you would like me to, but I would like to focus kind of on where we ended up during the discussion, during the work session, and just give you an idea of where we're headed. So there were really 3 things that I noted that we would be working on revisions for going forward to Planning Commission to get their input on. One was very simple. Mr. Dellinger brought about the question about whether the word residential was needed in use with the term dwelling units. So we went ahead and I've already marked that out in the proposed text. And then the other 2 was whether or not single-family detached should be included in multifamily zoning districts in relation to the new comprehensive plan recommendations going forward. We have started to look into that. I'm of the opinion that we probably can recommend that. We may need to look at potentially rezoning some of those neighborhoods that are MFA to maybe R8, but we'd want to be very selective and careful in how we approach those neighborhoods and let them know that, hey, this is potentially something that would remove you out of a non-conforming situation and give you standards by which you could expand your house. So still talking with Ms. Jones about that as far as what's the best way to approach that, but I think that is an avenue that we can pursue, because that would leave single-family detached out of the use table under MFA, which I do think there's a good argument for that. And then the third item was the commenting on referencing the street stub completion policy. Again, no issues with that, just trying to figure out where the best placement is at this point. And again, getting Ms. Jones to weigh in on that prior to Planning Commission would be just to actually add that as a section, probably a new section 8.3.12, which is at the end of the streets discussion, just to kind of be a good all-around wrap-up of the street requirements, and then making the note of the policy as it exists or may exist in the future. So those were the three takeaways that I had from the work session, and we certainly would get the language tidied up prior to Planning Commission so that they can make an informed recommendation back to you for possible adoption. But again, I'm happy to go through any of these again if you would like, but we did go through them, I think, pretty thoroughly on the 30th of October, but happy to answer any questions or dive back into anything.
Okay, and let's start with Mr. Vance down here to see if there's any questions or suggestions from the council.
I have no questions.
Mr. Dellinger?
No questions.
Ms. Behringer? Mr. Singleton?
4 for 4.
All right. Mr. Matthews?
5 for 5.
Take it home. Take it home. There you go. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Triesenberg. This does seem to be a well thought out and well researched technical correction to a very important document. Your staff has done its usual fine job. I think at this time we don't have any people signed up to speak on this topic, so I'm going to close the public hearing. I'm going to ask the council members for a motion or a second to refer this on to the Planning Commission for further review.
So moved.
Second.
I believe Mr. Vance made the motion, and the second was from Mr. Matthews. Okay. Motion made and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed by no? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Now we move along to the new and old business items. We have 3 on the agenda tonight, and I believe all 3 came here from staff. So I think I'll ask our town attorney, Ms. Jones, are you still satisfied with the order that we have these, or do you suggest any change in the order?
I believe there's a representative from Dominion Energy here. So if, for that reason, if we could move item 3 ahead of the other 2 items and talk about the gas franchise first, I'd appreciate that. So I don't have a formal presentation. Included, well, it was added to the packet, was a proposed ordinance. So franchises, particularly for utilities such as natural gas, have to be adopted by an ordinance that has to be voted on twice. The last time that Garner did this was in 1994 for a 30-year franchise. Public service company, which is Dominion, operating as Dominion Energy, they are asking for a similar 30-year franchise again. We made some updates to reflect kind of our current practices. I believe those are acceptable to Dominion, so I would ask for you to go ahead and take a vote on this franchise ordinance. For the first time, it would come back to you again on a consent agenda if it passed this time. That would allow them to continue operating and to expand their services within the town limits of Garner. This applies only within the town limits.
Okay. That seems pretty clear and straightforward to me. Again, well researched by our staff and kind of a routine business. Is there a motion and a second to approve passing this ordinance along?
So moved.
Ms. Behringer moves. Is there a second? Mr. Singleton. So all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by no. Motion passes unanimously. And thank you, Ms. Wright, for coming this evening, and thanks for the fine service that you've provided to my individual home. Everybody loves natural gas, don't they? And there's more than one. Thank you very much. Okay, so Ms. Jones, what would be the second item?
So we would go back, I guess, to talk about the mutual aid agreements with respect to the tornado response. My understanding is, although Apex, Morrisville, and Wake Forest offered to provide services, we haven't actually needed to use those. However, we would like to go ahead and have you ratify the agreements that your mayor signed. I believe he signed yesterday, and I forwarded those to those respective towns. This would give us the opportunity to call in, both for us to call in mutual aid if we would need it, and also to render aid to those sister communities should they need it in the event of storm response. So this really is limited to those kinds of emergency actions, not necessarily other types of emergencies that might occur.
So I think this has been kind of an informal practice over the years, and this kind of quantifies and solidifies that, and this is a step to make that a little more formal. Is that correct, Ms. Jones?
Right. My understanding is that a lot of times this just happens as needed, but it is better to have an actual agreement, state law that was updated for emergency management, kind of tells us to do this, and also says that while the mayor can do it, he needs consensus of council, and so we're trying to ratify that decision to go ahead. And particularly Apex had requested kind of a formal agreement. It just helps to protect both municipalities and to know what that relationship is and who's responsible, and that we will negotiate in good faith to reimburse as necessary, things that may happen or for expenses that are unanticipated by another jurisdiction. Now, had it been a larger natural disaster type thing and we were looking for FEMA or state, reimbursement, we would have to go through a different kind of process, but it's often helpful to have these agreements in place to show that we do have a plan for dealing with natural disasters as they occur.
Thank you. Mr. Matthews, you had a comment?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Having served on the Garner Fire Department as a volunteer years ago, mutual aid is already a precedent has already been established with the fire service, like for Clayton or Nightdale. I remember when Fran come through, we did a lot of mutual aid helping each department out, and I think this is a great thing. Second question I have is, are we looking at making this available like closer neighbors like Fuquay, or they just didn't want to have a part of this? Just for information purposes, I didn't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. My understanding was that these three municipalities actually reached out. It may be because your former police chief is a town manager or assistant town manager in one of those, so he's very familiar with Garner and the needs of that. But I can certainly reach out to other jurisdictions to see if they want to put in place a similar agreement. Obviously, Raleigh has a lot more resources than other, jurisdictions, but yes, we can certainly reach out to them.
This is a great idea. I was curious why more people wouldn't want to participate, because we know it works.
Yeah, excuse me if I can interject. For I think with Apex and who was the other? Apex and Morrisville contacted the public works director, and then the town manager in Wake Forest contacted me and just offered up any assistance we may need. So these were just the ones that reached out to us immediately following the storm. So, but certainly we have a really good working relationship with all of the communities in Wake County, and we'd be willing to help anyone, and anyone would be willing to help us when the need arises. So.
Excellent. We do have a great history there. Any other questions or observations? Okay. Well, with that in mind, then I'm going to see if we have a motion and a second to ratify this agreement.
So move.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Vance and seconded by Mr. Matthews. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed by no? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Not anonymously. We all know who you are. You can't be anonymous up here. But you can be unanimous. Thank you. Okay. And we have the other item on the new and old business is the Jones Sausage Road project update. Presenter is our Assistant Town Manager, Jody Miller. Would you like to give us some information on this?
Yes, Mayor. Good evening, and great to see all the council members this evening. I'm going to do the introduction, and then I'm going to hand it off to our experts on this project moving forward. Tonight, we're going to provide an update to council on the Jones Sausage Road CIP project. As you recall, during our discussions this fall, we determined that the full scope of the project, as we've been working towards, was unaffordable. The escalating cost of the project really made it something that we were not able to continue to pursue in its current form. So based on looking at the financials, council asked us to go back and look at the project and see if we could rescope the project to still retain some of the benefits of the project, but make sure that it was within the budget of the project. During this time period this fall, we also learned from Campo that there was an opportunity for the town to receive $7.6 million for this project to move forward. And so tonight, we're bringing to you the rescoping of this project, so council has an opportunity to see what that looks like. Also included is going to be the financial analysis on this project based on the rescoping option and the opportunity to receive some money from Campo. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our experts. With us this evening, we have our town engineer, Ms. Harrison, and we also have our budget director, Ms. Warren. And so, Ms. Harrison, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jody. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. We are here tonight, like Ms. Miller said, to give you an update on the Jones Sausage Road project. Just to catch us up to this point for everyone here and anyone watching, the Jones Sausage Road Improvement Project was slated to be a project that widened Jones Sausage Road to a 4-lane median divided facility with 5-foot sidewalk on the east side and a 10-foot multi-use path on the west side. And this would be from Amazon, the Amazon facility, and the improvements that they did to Jones Sausage down to Partlow Street, which is just south of Garner Road. That was the original scope of this project. Additionally, there were improvements on East Garner Road and the intersection with Jones Sausage, which includes additional turn lanes with storage, pedestrian curb ramps, push buttons at all 4 corners, bus stop boarding pad, and a multi-use path along the north side. Project progression to date. So the feasibility study for this project was done back in January of 2020. That's when we were looking at the very preliminary phases of this phase of the project, in addition to the next phase, which will be the realignment of Jones Sausage down to US 70. We had our 30% design completed in spring of 2022 and held the first public meeting in July of 2022. Around the time of that public meeting was when we really started to have some concerns about the potential impacts to septic and well at the properties along Jones Sausage Road. And so prior to pushing the design to the next phase, which would be the 65%, we decided to pursue the detailed evaluations of the septic and well impacts to those properties. And we'll go into a little more detail about that in a moment. So we finally had 65% design and cost estimate in September 2023. This is when we provided you all an update on the project and the new cost expectations. And since then, we have been exploring value engineering options and rescoping options for the project to try to make it feasible within the budget that we have. So some challenges with the current scope of the project prior to the rescoping. So the findings from the septic evaluations revealed significant impacts to the properties, primarily on the west side of Jones Sausage Road. 11 properties would have septic impacts, and would need to be connected to public water and sewer. So these are properties where the septic system is impacted, and the professionals who did the study were not able to find an alternate location on the property for us to relocate the septic. So they would have to be connected to sewer and water to replace the septic field. 6 properties would have well impacts and would need public water connections. 4 wells would be impacted but did have locations to be relocated, so those would be needed to be relocated, and 2 septic systems would have to be relocated. All of this, the right-of-way and easement acquisition significantly increased once we knew these impacts, as well as just the impacts to the lives of the people that live along that corridor and their homes and their property. So with these known impacts and additional right-of-way costs projected, pursuing this scope would put the Jones Sausage Road project over budget by $4.7 million, which is a combination of construction cost and right-of-way cost, but primarily those additional right-of-way costs where we were running into the issues. So the impact of that obviously is not small when you're looking at almost $5 million over budget. So these are some of the issues that we were wrestling with around that time. As Ms. Miller said, we at the same time had an offer from CAMPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, for an award for LAP funding, which for anyone who is not aware, LAP funding is funding that we get through the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is through NCDOT, to help us with the costs of some of these larger roadway projects. And we were able to get award of $7.68 million from the FY24 LAP funding, which we previously did not believe we had been funded for. So due to some issues with other projects that had been awarded, that money was available for us to accept, which of course is a good thing, but we wrestled with that versus the increase in cost that we were seeing. So reviewing the financial impacts of accepting that award, it led us to an overall deficit of $2 million compared to what we had budgeted in the CIP at that time. So we were getting additional money potentially from LAP, but we still had that $5 million increase. And really within our capital program and the capital budget, we did not have a $2 million wiggle room, I suppose, to just keep going with that. So that's what led us to these rescoping options and really looking at what was going to be the best project that we could do. The first thing we looked at is the most important probably part of this project is the intersection. That's really the piece where you get the most impactful improvements is improving that intersection. So we knew that we needed to keep that within the scope. In addition to the intersection, to really make this a viable project, we needed to keep the widening on the east side of the road to have those 2 lanes going northbound from the intersection up to Amazon and then up to I-40. So the rescoped project proposes keeping the east side of the road as it was previously. So there would be 2 lanes headed northbound instead of the one that is there now. We would add curb and gutter and the 5-foot sidewalk along that extent, which allows us to have sidewalk from the Amazon facility down to the Garner Road intersection with pedestrian access there and across Garner Road down to where the middle school is and Partlow Street. The portion that we propose eliminating at this time is the additional lane and the curb and gutter and multi-use path on the west side of the road, primarily because this was the side of the road where we saw the vast majority of those well and septic impacts and the right-of-way impacts. The intersection itself will remain the same as in the original scope. The idea being that when we, in the future, do decide to complete the rest of this north portion of the project on the west side, and when we look at that south portion of the project that would realign Jones Sausage Road, none of the work that we do in this first phase would have to be redone. It would all be set up to pick up from there and move to the next phase. Some of the accomplishments or the benefits of the rescoped option, of course, the reduced resident impacts, which was one of our main goals. Removing the southbound travel lane eliminates connecting 7 properties with septic impacts to water and sewer, eliminates connecting 4 properties to water, removes 1 well relocation and 1 septic system relocation. It still maintains improvements to the critical need. So as we discussed, the intersection is really the most critical piece of this project, and it still allows us to improve the level of service at that intersection, and also sets up the intersection for the south leg of the project, which would be the rail separation in the future. A lot of improvements to pedestrian connectivity. As I mentioned, we'd have sidewalk from Amazon all the way to East Garner Road. We'll have curb ramps and push buttons at all 4 corners of the intersection, which is currently not a pedestrian-friendly intersection to cross. And as more and more things develop in that area, that will be important for safety. Also will be important for connection with transit. And we're still able to provide a bus stop boarding pad at the southwest corner of East Garner Road and Jones Sausage Road. Also, this makes our project more financially feasible. Rescoping saves us $4.6 million in right-of-way and construction cost. I'm going to pass it over to Sarah to cover a couple slides here.
Good evening. So Sarah Warren, Budget Director for the town. I just want to overview some of the budget issues that Leah has kind of alluded to. You'll see in our first column, this is what we put together in the FY24-28 CIP that was adopted as part of the FY24 budget. So you can see here we had programmed approximately $20 million for the project. And I want to note that we had also anticipated or had a conservative estimate of $5 million in LAP funding. When we started getting the numbers on the well and septic, we were able to update the project budget, which you can see that additional $4.7 million in costs, but it's also offset by about $2.7 million in additional funding from LAP. But we're still in a $2 million deficit. With our rescope project, it brings our total expense budget down to just under $20 million. But because of that additional funding from LAP, it does give us a cushion of about $2.9 million. So not only did we get a little bit more money from LAP, but we were able to bring the cost down with the rescope. So what does this mean? Obviously, we are able to supplant some of our 2021 bond funds that we have allocated to the project by about $2.8 million, 2.9. That brings us within budget for the current project with a little bit of contingency. I think one of the concerns that we continue to have when we look at a lot of our transportation projects, if you'll recall, all of the current bond projects for transportation have been allocated. So Leah talked about not having that wiggle room for that $2 million deficit. This gives us $2.8 million in wiggle room to address issues that may occur as we progress through the project. The volatility of the market, especially in transportation, and increased costs is significant, so we are trying to be cognizant of that. And so staff would recommend holding that additional funding in contingency for the project to make sure we are able to cover any cost increases we may or may not see. The other piece that we also have to consider is some cash flow challenges. We've come to you before about our fund balance. I know that y'all have mentioned it as well. As we continue to grow our budget, our 30% fund balance starts to look a little tight, right? With that said, we have programmed out our bond sales for our last sale would be in the spring of 2027. That sale would be to cash flow the construction of Jones Sausage. Right now, as the schedule is showing, construction would start earlier. So there would be some time between when we needed to encumber the funds
and then when the funding became available through the bond sale. We think as a staff we can manage that and that won't be an issue, but it is something that we need to make you aware of as we move forward, and that we would continue to monitor it as the project progresses and bring to you any issues that we find. But we do think we can address some of that. Overall, I think this having a rescope project gives staff a little bit more comfort in the fiscal nature of what we've been dealing with, so we're not as concerned about the risks as we were previously. But any questions, I'll wait until Leah finishes up. You can ask those.
Thank you. Ms. Harrison, do you have some other comments?
Just a quick wrap up. So a couple of other notes. We did hold a public meeting with the residents in the area last week and again today before the meeting to show them the rescoped option and get some feedback from them as well. And we are taking that into consideration as we look at the way to move forward also. Overall, our staff recommendation at this point is one, approving the rescope would be our recommendation. The rescope project is feasible within the FY 24 to 29 CIP budget. And as Sarah said, we recommend matching last year's budget submission and holding the additional $2.8 million in contingency for this project. Staff recommends accepting the FY 24 LAP funding, that is guaranteed LAP funding, as opposed to waiting to see if we will be awarded future LAP funding. One note about the LAP funding, which ties to what Sarah mentioned about the cash flow, is there are some expectations from Campo on timeline associated with that funding. So that is one piece that we are still working through, is the ability for the town to move forward expeditiously with right-of-way so that we can meet the expected timelines of Campo or show a very good faith effort toward it as we move forward. The town was given to the end of this year, which is very quickly approaching us, to decide whether we will accept FY24 funds. And as I mentioned, this is guaranteed. With that, if we accept the FY24 LAP funding, we recommend withdrawing the FY25 LAP application that we submitted. We have been notified by Campo that for FY25, our project scored second and could receive $2.25 million in funding from FY25. We don't see this as a good option in light of the potential $7.6 million that we have that's guaranteed from FY24. So those are our recommendations for you tonight, and we're looking for your guidance to move forward. And we are happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Harrison and Ms. Warren. That's just a fantastic presentation of a very complex situation. It impacts a lot of people and their homes. It's very sensitive. Clearly, between the engineering and the budget departments, you've given it a lot of attention to try to minimize that impact, work with each property owner individually. The public meetings and the open houses have been very important. It kind of boils down to not a bird in the hand versus two in the bush. This is two in the hand versus one in the bush. If we move quickly, we can get an additional $7 million. We have to apparently not do the complete project in one fell swoop, like waving a magic wand. But if we can do it a piece at a time, it looks like we could be millions of dollars ahead. That's my primitive understanding of what you're saying.
Yeah, we think that's the most feasible approach that still provides benefit but also doesn't overexpend the funds that we have.
Gotcha. With that being said, I'll defer to council members here for other questions or observations. Mr. Vance?
Yes, I will say thank you very much for the briefing on the rescoped project. And just for general information, when I was at DOT, this was not anything unusual to happen where a project would have to be rescoped based upon a number of different items, and this one is primarily funding of it and adjusting the scope accordingly, and then maintaining the improvements for the critical need is very important. Also, minimizing the impact to the citizens is also important, and the budget and all that playing together. So you had a lot of balls in the air, and what you have provided still will provide the services that we're looking for when it comes to the that particular stretch of Jones Sausage Road. So I would say it's acceptable in my eye as the direction you're going, and it's excuse me one second, and it is feasibly, it is a feasible alternative to use at this point in time. Although you're not going to please everybody with it, but yet still it is feasible at this time, and I would just leave it at that for right now.
Thank you. Mr. Dellinger?
I've thought a lot about this. And I appreciate all the hard work that staff has put into this project. I know when I came on the council, this was a $2 million project. Now it's a $20 million project for 70% of what we need to do. I think what I'm struggling with is we're seeing the consequence sort of right now of not having updated our transportation plan. And I say that because we have 540 coming through. We don't know what needs are there. We have Edge of Auburn. You drive down that way and look at some of the intersections on Rock Quarry Road, you're like, this is not going to work. This is going to be broken. When we look at Bryan Road and White Oak, that's a project that we knew we needed to do. We tried to do a development agreement to do it, to cobble it together. When I'm looking at $15 million, I'm like, how many intersection improvements could we do in different parts of Garner over the next 5 or 6 years that are going to have a much more substantial impact on the community? I'm having a hard time seeing the return on the town's investment here when I'm not seeing large subdivisions go in, new commercial opportunities, tax-based generation. There's this mythical talk of the flyover over the railroad that'll eventually cost $100 million in 20 years, and no one's ever been able to explain how that's going to fix traffic around White Oak. I'm just having a hard time, and I hear the words, we're a little more cautiously optimistic about the contingency, and we feel a little bit better about, I'm not going to put my wife on the spot, but sometimes when you spend money, you don't save money by spending money. And somebody can give us $7 million, but if we're locking up $15 million plus maybe this, actually locking up 18 because we're locking up another 2.8 in reserve, we have a whole other town that has transportation needs that we haven't properly quantified yet people will come here and complain about traffic. There may be other opportunities to partner with developers and leverage some of that money to do some projects. Again, the initial idea, crafted 5, 6, 7 years ago, they haven't been updated to the growth that's happening all around Garner. And with the budget being tight, even in the audit, the presentation that was there tonight, it was masked with that ARP funding. They're like, oh, we got a big bump in your money. It's like, no, that's temporary money. Those two lines, he said, we need to worry about these lines going apart from each other. I bet if you took out of that ARP money, they're going apart, aren't they? She's kind of nodding over there. We have reval happening next year, soon. We don't know what the impact, that could be very positive for the budget. It could be less positive for the budget. It's going to be better. We just don't know by how much. I just have a lot of concerns on the real return on the investment in this part of Garner. It's a lot of capital to tie up in one part of town that is not one of the more critically transportation challenged parts of town. It has its issues, but adding 2 lanes going north and leaving 1 lane going south, I have a feeling this is one of the things we'll look back at. It'll get done, and it's going to be like this for another 10 years on the west side of the project. And the intersection at Jones Sausage, that flyover, what's the updated timeline for that?
I don't think we ever had a timeline for that.
If we don't have a timeline for something, it shouldn't even be in our plans. So, that's why would we even build up all that infrastructure for something that's not even on anybody else's timeline? So I have a lot of concerns, and using that bond money on a very concentrated area of the town when you got 35,000 other residents in other parts of the town that might need an intersection improvement that is expensive, but if we got $3 million and if we could do Bryan Road, White Oak, because money's there, and not have to do a whole bunch of finagling with developer agreements, and And I know we've had some other conversations. We're not in the pipeline right now for doing another bond issue anytime in the near future either. So I get the gift of money. It's helpful. But I think it costs us other opportunities around town, and having not updated our transportation plan in 15 years, in a significant way, I don't think we really understand what some of our traffic and road challenges are in some of these parts of Garner that are coming out of the ground right now. So I'm against it unless I can be convinced otherwise. I'm flexible, but it's a lot of money to tie up in one part of town.
May I add one thing in reference to the finance of road projects throughout this country? There's been a significant increase in projects, period. As to what we do, no matter where we go, it's going to be expensive because of the cost of materials, cost of labor, cost of equipment. Everything has gone up astronomically. So to say that this is a lot of money dumped in one area, that's relative to the cost of how things have changed within the economic system.
But my point is, when this is done, how much better is it going to be for people?
But we have a level of service, do we not?
Yep.
Does it meet the level of service?
Currently, no. So I guess a couple different things we can look at. Our consultant for this project did a projection for a 2045. That's far out, but that's about how far out on a metropolitan planning organization level they look at. So 2045, no build with no improvements from the project. Level of service at the intersection is F across the board. We're looking at average 4-minute delay in the AM peak hour and 4.8-minute delay in the PM peak hour. With project improvements, we are at less than a 1-minute delay for both AM and PM peak hour. And our level of service is in the C and D range, which NCDOT considers acceptable. Another thing, just because it brings it a little bit closer timeline-wise than 2045, because that is a long ways to look out. Looking at some of the analysis done by development in the area, the 2022 existing level of service for the AM and PM peak hour is C, D, F are the levels depending on which approach you're looking at. In 2029, no build, it would be E and F for those level of service. And that's without this particular development, just using their analysis without them being built. But we're looking just natural projection of growth. By 2029, we'll be at an E and F level of service instead of the C and D that we would be at with the project. That's one way to quantify. I know there are definitely a lot of places that need improvements. And certainly that's something that you all have to weigh, of course. I think, we see this as an important project because of some of the things that are coming to that area. There is a lot of development up Jones Sausage, and even further up, we've seen a lot of proposed development along Wilmington Road and Creech Road that all kind of funnels to this area. Additionally, with the construction of the new Yergin Park, and that being very close to this intersection and requiring some improvements at this intersection. So we see that it sets up with the pedestrian connectivity and the increased intersection improvements that you'll need to host those bigger events that you would like to be able to host at the park. So those are some of the things that make it a high priority, I would say, on our list.
I appreciate the work that you all have done. It's been a great presentation, and I have a different perspective than Councilmember Dellinger. I live there, and that part of Garner has been on the back burner for a long time. We are seeing applications for more and more development, and with more development, we're going to need more road improvements, more traffic being moved more efficiently than it is now. I know at times now, especially in the PM hours, traffic is backed up all the way to 40 for that intersection because you cannot get through. I know that all over town, We have needs because we're growing. But North Garner has not been dealt with. It has not been given priority in decades, and we need to pay attention to that. Jones Sausage Road's in terrible shape right now, and it's not going to be improved until we do something about it. In the meantime, there was a wreck near there yesterday afternoon. I don't know what happened, but I know there were several police cars there. We need some road improvements there, and we need it yesterday. I'm sorry that it's going to be 4 or 5 years, but I'm glad it's coming at some point.
Thank you very much. Very, very insightful. Mr. Singleton?
Well, the cost increase has affected all our projects, everything. I mean, the roundabout at Hebron Church and Ackerman and White Oak has what, quadrupled? I mean, so if you say we can do projects in another part of town, yeah, you might get one or two, but the cost, because what we projected for that is far, far greater than any of us had ever thought. Look at the cost. What White Oak, the White Oak and Bryan Road signal intersection. I bet when we get the numbers, it'll be substantially higher than the numbers they gave us. That's why I think it was important, as Mr. Dellinger pushed for updated cost as it got closer to the project. The biggest concern with me on Jones Sausage Road is the intersection with Garner Road. That intersection has got to be made safer and got to be improved. That just has to be, because it's, I remember when there was no stoplight there. And I don't remember when Jones Sausage Road was a dirt road, but I do remember when roads off of it were dirt roads. You remember. And I remember when it was just a narrow 2-lane paved road and there was no 40, and you went down to Balcom Road, which is a dirt road, and this road was just a dirt road. And when I went to school at East Garner, which is a long time ago, we also need to remember that East Garner is going to either build a new campus or add a bigger campus or something, but they did acquire some property just to the east of where they are. So you're going to have, the school's not going anywhere. East Garner Elementary is not going anywhere. So you can have that school traffic regardless. And also the school traffic that comes or may come to Creech Road into North Garner Middle School. So the intersection is so vital to me in improving that whole area. And of course, as has been explained to us, when you do that, you have to improve up and down Garner Road because of the height that you're raising the whole intersection so many feet or whatever it was. So the project is expensive. The concern, I did email staff yesterday and said, okay, we got 2.88 million left, but we're not going to start until July 26. By God, the way escalation's going, that 2.88 will be like pocket change. That's one of my biggest concerns, is that you're going to scope it and we're going to be riding such a fine line. The next thing you know, we're going to need 2.88 more. That's my biggest concern, is scope it down even less. I look at Ms. Dunn's, I'm looking at the map since my monitor's not working. I'm looking at that map, which is in our package. And I'm looking at that big driveway that goes across right to where our house is. And I'm thinking, there's nothing, we can't do anything there. You can't make it a no turn because they got to turn into an Amazon. They got to turn into this other place. And I'm looking at this big driveway thinking, God, that's mighty big. No wonder she's concerned, but we hopefully will address her issues. We'll get her issues addressed. But, I just worry that I have no trouble with taking the money, but I'm just wondering, and the funds to help improve this and make it safer, because we got a school there. And we got traffic going to school at this intersection. That's my biggest concern, is the intersection. But we're gonna need to tap off about another $2 or $3 million in improvement somewhere, because we'll never ever cover the cost if we don't start to July 2026. We just won't. But we also have to remember, we told the citizens in that bond referendum we were going to do this. Now, we can't help that it cost increased, but it's what we said we were going to do. And we're not going to be able to do it to that scope. So before we finish, we'll see if he can let you chat. Yes, ma'am. But that's one of the big concerns is we're going to be riding a fine line. I mean, we've already had to use money from different sources to do the roundabout, and we've had to use other money to do money here and money there. So that's one of my biggest concerns. But the intersection is just dangerous, and it needs to be improved. And those trucks from the quarry have been coming there since I went to middle school in East Garner. They've been coming before that, and that's over 40 years ago. So it was in the 70s. And they're not going to go away because the quarry's not going anywhere. So you can always have those trucks there. So that's just one of my biggest concerns. But I just think we're on such a fine line. Can you find something else to eliminate for about $3 million so you have more money? Because I'm just really worried that we're going to be cutting it so close, we're going to look back and go, golly, maybe we shouldn't have done this, or could we adjust this or adjust that? That's all I've got for them right now.
Thank you very much.
I can speak to that briefly if that's okay before we jump, just to answer a couple of those questions. A couple things, it's certainly a valid concern. We've seen how prices have been very erratic lately. If this is the direction we're moving forward, we've got a lot of development to do on this rescoped option still. So there's ways we can continue to look at changes we make and how that plays out. Also, we mentioned the additional 2.8 holding that like a contingency. That being said, within that budget, there is a contingency already built in, as we build into all of our projects. I don't know, do you know the percentage? 15% of the construction cost. So that budget number that you're seeing includes that 15% contingency there as well. And then the 2.8 is just kind of our extra contingency because that's what we already have in the budget. So we do have a little bit more wiggle room over the estimated cost.
I understand, but Six Forks Road started at what, 31 million? Now it's 117?
25.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's always a concern. Like I said, valid concern for sure.
It's so much that we got the money here because they're going to have to go through a whole different process because they're going to rescope, as I understand, to try to pare down the costs. Okay, thank you. I appreciate the information. Sure. Yeah, so it's 15% of the, whatever it was, 22 million or 22 is 15% of ours. It's in here somewhere.
Yeah, let's look back here. So the construction portion, which is the 10.9.
Yes, 15% of that is contingency.
Right.
Okay.
So that the additional, if we start getting into, because right of way and utility relocation is where there's a ton of volatility. That's where we might need to look into some of the contingency, depending upon what utility and right of way starts looking like.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You can see where it went from 5.3 to 10.7 and now back to 6.2.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Matthews?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We were at a Mayor's Association gathering last night, and I got a chance to talk to a lot of our fellow councilmen, mayors from all the other towns, and what we're dealing with here is nothing unusual that they're not already dealing with, and we're all in the same sheet of music together. Having said that, great job on what you've come back with a secondary plan here, and it looks feasible. The growth on that road, because we've still got a lot of commercial buildings over there that's fixing to start putting, I guess, clients in, and we're going to see even another increase on traffic on that road. And so with what y'all have come up with, I know it's not a perfect world out there trying to figure all this stuff. Everything could change by the end of next year, who knows, but thinking positive and working with what we've got right now, that's the only thing we can count on. And Mr. Singleton's right, paving, all stuff is going up in price, and, we don't know what the situation is. But what you have come up with, I think we need to move on it because we don't need to lose that money. And you guys got as much contingency played into this as you can with what we've got to work with. And we've got to do something, that intersection back up in there. So it just can't be put off. So whatever we need to do, Mr. Mayor, I'm supporting. Let's do what we've got to do here.
Okay, thank you. Excellent input. As was mentioned once or twice, this is not really a public hearing. We're not really scheduled to take testimony. I know the staff has been working hard with the residents with the public meetings, but by the same token, we see some people here tonight who have been involved in that. If there's someone who needs to speak, I will waive the rule, and if you have one representative who wants to address the council on this topic for 3 minutes or less, we'll waive the rule and do that tonight. Is there there one representative that could speak?
Mayor Gupton, may I just add, Bobby, on this particular topic, just for before the citizen comes up to speak, in reference to the improvements to Jones Sausage Road, if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong, we were thinking in the process of, with that flyover that was mentioned that is out there, that this project will make that project possibly more feasible because of the amount of investment the town is making right here. And am I correct to say that?
Correct. Yeah, we know that next part of the project is not something the town can do alone. That's a huge project. But I think it will be infeasible to have other entities look at that project as a potential project without having this portion completed.
But the point I'm making is the investment that we're making here will make that project.
Right. It makes that a viable project for consideration for funding. Yeah.
But
so I have two quick questions. What will be our financial contribution necessary in that project?
Right. We don't know that yet. Yeah.
So this is where I have the other issue. Mr. Singleton mentioned the roundabout, quadrupled in price. If this only goes up 50%, that's $10 million. Where is that $10 million going to come from? We do not have that $10 million. It is not sitting in fund balance. It's not sitting under a mattress somewhere. We are committed to finishing that project, and then we're going to start pulling money from other parts of the town to try to finish this project. I respect Mr. Singleton's point. That intersection needs improvement. Maybe we need to just scope this down to do that. This has the potential to become a big resource suck for the town, and it's resources we don't have. Our 5-year projections from last year's budget. People are already sick of tax increases. We're going to have to do tax increases whether or not we even do this project. That's just another reality because it's paid for with the bond. We need to see what the financial impact of this project would be if it goes up 50% in cost over the next 5 years and 100%. Because we have to answer now, where's that money coming from? And I haven't seen it. And it's an investment, I understand. But if it pulls resources from every other opportunity we may have in the town, is that a risk we're willing to take? I just don't see where the money comes from if it goes over budget. That's all. And everything we've done has gone over budget, significantly over budget. So we could be putting ourselves in quicksand.
Mr. Mayor, that's the point I wanted to make in reference to what I was saying, in reference to in doing this project and how this may facilitate further projects going down the road. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. Excellent points. A lot of factors to be considered. And yes, I will take testimony or input from the representative of the neighbors out there if there's one who wants to speak for the neighbors. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for sharing with us. If you would state your name and address, and if we can keep it to 3 minutes, we'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Mary Yarborough. I'm at 5660 Jones Sausage Road in Garner. Okay. I've heard so many things, and I know that a lot of times, anytime you're doing anything in life, you can make a mistake. Okay? And I do believe it is very good when you know you've made a mistake to at least honor that. I did make a mistake. What do we do now that's going to satisfy all of us a little bit better, even you, on the mistake that you made? One of the first ones is to stop the killing. The killing of who? People who ride in this road. Now, I have asked many times when we started with this thing, to cut that speed back, number one. And there is a sign, can't hardly see it though, 35 miles an hour, okay? But a lot more than that that's been driven up and down that road and still is. I have asked many times for more monitoring. Some of that 2,000 extra that you got and you don't have enough to spend here and there, why can't you put it into monitoring if you got to pay the tab? The road to get people to see, slow it down because we're not ready for you yet to be speedy like you are. That can be done. There are some things, y'all, that can be done. That the maze, when I go to that maze that you built there on John Sausage Road, every time I go, I have to first of all slow down there. Make sure you're not driving no more than, say, 15, 20 miles an hour, so I know what sign I'm supposed to follow. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's not the best we could have done. Now, the next thing I want to address is, who are we doing this for? Who is this project being done for? Is it really being done for Garner, or is it being done for Amazon? And why is it the richest person in this whole project, why can't that person put some more money into this project? Did you make a mistake with the negotiation of getting them here? That's a mistake. That's a mistake. Now, we're still going to suffer until we say, we've got to have some more money. We want to do it, but we need your help. And the people on Jones Sausage Road will not throw it away to you that they don't want to sell that property, because they do, to get out of the mess. I know I do. I've been there just as long as any of them on the street. Okay? Who are we doing it for? You answer that question. These ladies have done a good job according to what they had, but I want you to understand, if you don't have it to do it with, you're going to be behind always. You go to the bank and you want to borrow money to do something for you. If there is an increase, or if you make a boo-boo, who is going to be responsible? You are. And the bank's going to take theirs. So I'm simply saying to all of you, stop and rethink. Who are you doing this for? Multi-billionaire. And all you've got to do is sit him down and say, we still want you here, but do you have a heart to help us out? Do you have a heart to help us out so we can go on and get this project done for you? Progress is going to happen, always. You have in front of you a situation we're in, and this is good for you. You've got to rethink before you jump out there and say yes. And all parties ought to be involved. I know Wake County is part of paying the part of this bill. I know all these other people are involved, but get your billionaire involved to solve your problem. That's all I got to say.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Yarborough. Certainly heartfelt. And this whole project, the whole change, very impactful on you and your neighbors. We cannot overlook that. We have to be conscious of all of those things. So been a lot of discussion, been a lot of input on a very important question, and the question before the council is to consider approving the rescope project area and acceptance of the funding to move ahead with this improvement. And with that, is there a motion to make that approval?
So moved.
Okay, Mr. Vance makes the motion. Ms. Behringer seconds the motion. And I think just for clarity, instead of all aye or nay, I think we'll take a voice vote one-on-one, aye or nay, and we'll start with Mr. Matthews, aye or nay.
Excuse me. Point of order. Can we have just a couple more minutes of debate after the second on the motion or conversation?
if there's anything new, again, we've overstretched our 2 minutes or 2 hours here so far, but this is very important. If we can keep it to just a very few minutes, then certainly we can have another comment or two.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't be I'm not in favor of this as proposed for the financial reasons I've outlined. To Mr. Singleton's point and Vance's points and Kathy's points, Ms. Behringer's points, there need to be some type of safety improvements at the intersection. The intersection should take precedence over the rest of this. I'm seeing other minor intersection and driveway and widening. The line is so fine on this project, and they just don't seem to go down in cost. And I guess my question is there a way to scope this project down for the funding that would limit the improvements to the intersection and the turn lane widening and extensions and all that? Or is that, I don't know what the proposal was and what their criteria is.
Yeah, no, sure, good question. That's actually the first rescoping that we looked at after we talked with y'all last time, is we asked our consultant to look at just doing the intersection, just build out the intersection and leave the rest as is. That still included a lot of improvements along Garner Road, just because you have to get the laneage in there. It ended up just really not being feasible, and there's a lot of technical reasons why, but a lot of it was where you're going to have to widen a portion of Jones Sausage Road because there's more lanes at the intersection than there is on the rest of the road. So similar to what we have on the west side now, you'd have the same on the east side. And because of where those improvements would stop and the point in the road that they would stop and the way that the drainage worked because of that, we ended up basically adding more cost back in because of drainage changes and utility impacts, to where it was not as much savings and not as effective as we needed it to be. So it really worked better from a design standpoint to carry those improvements through on the east, because we could continue the drainage improvements all the way through as well.
The last question is, what's sort of the timeline for, yes, we'll take this money, yes, we'll do this. At what point can we pull the plug and say, we changed our mind because of X, Y, and Z? What's that look like for this money?
Mm-hmm. That's how we got this money, is because someone else changed their mind, basically. They moved forward and decided that their project was not feasible and they had to give the money back. That can happen. We have the flexibility to use this funding that we're getting for right-of-way and construction in any sort of division that we want to use it. So I think as Sarah mentioned, the utilities and the right-of-way are two of your most volatile cost areas in a project, because we estimate the best we can, but there's a lot of unknown there. So if we decide to move forward tonight with the rescoped project area, we will move forward with the design as well, push that to the 65%, which is a little more solid, and that's the point where for each of those potential right-of-way impacts, we will look at it on a parcel-by-parcel basis and start talking to those property owners. That will all be prior to any expenditure of these funds happening, as well as starting to do the utility coordination. So I think getting a handle on those two things, which would happen before we start spending those funds, will hopefully give us a better level of comfort about where we stand.
Thank you.
Does that satisfy your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Very important question. And the answer is that, in a way, it's still a work in progress, but we have to make a decision about moving ahead tonight. Thank you. But there's still adjustments that could be made as we go forward. Thank you. With that being said, we should take a vote now, and I'm going to ask that we do it individually, as aye or nay, and I'll start with...
I'm going to just briefly follow Mr. Mayor, just got a couple of minutes. We're talking about $22 million. It doesn't matter if we stay here 1 more hour or 4 more hours, we're talking about $22 million. I agree with Mr. Dellinger. I will support the funds, but I want to see a rescoped and reduced project. I want to see a reduced project from 10 to 20% total on the construction, because I'm afraid the right-of-way utility relocation is going to suck that 10 to 20% right up. And I just, we got to scope this in a way that we're not, as Damien said, pulling $2, $3, $4 million for something else. We need to go ahead and get the $2, $3, $4 million out of the project. The total shouldn't be 22,691. The total needs to be 18 to 19,691. Got to rescope this project to a point that we cannot.
I want to note that the current expense budget is 19.8 million. So we have just over 22.7 million in available revenues, but our current cost estimates with that 15% contingency, the current budget is 19.8.
Okay, so we're at 20, so let's get it down to 18. We need, I see the right away and utility relocation at 6.2. I mean, let's just all think that's going to go 25 or 30%. That's just all like we can think of if it's not going to start till 2026. And we need to find a way to reduce that money somewhere. So I'll support moving forward, but you can update us and make sure we know that we have plenty of time to see these updates before we have to say, hey, we're going to turn the money into, or no, we're moving forward.
So, Mr. Singleton, one challenge with that is that any additional rescoping of the project would have to be rescored by Campo, and we don't know that it would qualify for the funding. So it's a very difficult decision to even recommend moving forward because it is a very fine line of affordability. If council wants us to look at rescoping, I think we really would need to seriously consider foregoing the funding, because while there is some flexibility of going back later and saying no to it, Leah did say this is because someone else had a change in theirs, but the difference is Campo's executive board is going to be asked to take a vote next month to award the funding. And I really believe it would be in the town's probably best interest to not move forward with that formal award and then have to redo it dramatically later. So I do think that if you really want to rescope the project, we might have to think about foregoing the immediate funding, as financially challenging as that is, and then looking at ways to redo the project within the funding we have, or look at submitting this for an FY26 funding year. We already know that there's another project ahead of us for the FY25 award. There's some volatility with that. That could come back later, and that funding, that's the same project that was in limbo for the FY24, but I do want to be very respectful of Campo and their process, and if we really think that we do want to do some additional rescoping, I believe it would be probably best if we forego the funding and do it within the budget that we have, or look for future funding in another cycle.
And we need to look for future funding in a future cycle. If we can't do 25, and we all know who the other party is, then we need to look for that in 26. We need to look for that, if it's the project scored in 2025, scored, received 2.25 million. Well, that's about what we need. So
only that much.
Only that much,
yeah.
We would hope.
Yeah.
But now that would be the 2.8. Excuse me, the 24 submission has already gone through for approval.
So this is $24 that would have been awarded in September.
Right.
And that money was unaccepted or not accepted, right. So it was offered to us. So this would mean that while we have a little less of a timing constraint, we still have some timing constraints to meet certain criteria in terms of getting right-of-way started. So I think we're on a very, very, very tight timeline as it is. And so to all the other points of concern that I've heard tonight, the FY24 may not be feasible. The FY25 scores were just released. Our project did score second, but the project in first place was asking for $14 million of a $16.25 million pot that they have to work with this year. And so that project is tentatively being awarded $14 million. So the 2.6 that we would get for being second is not based on our score. It's just project number one requested 14 and got it. We would be getting whatever's left for the year. And so that unless that project that scored number one moves out of contention, then we know that we would only be qualifying for 2.65. So that's not enough to even start. That's way less than the 7.68. So that would put us at the funding cycle for FY26. And so we could, if we do that, then I think we would be about 1 year later than the current schedule you've seen in getting construction started. So even though the cycle is longer to apply, there's some of that preliminary work we could be doing to make up some of that. But I think we would be starting about a year later on the construction.
So explain to me again, if we scored second and there's $2.25 million there, but you're saying not ask for it, but that would give us the $2.25 million we need.
No. So
I'm just reading off right here, which is on our on our information.
So
the project scored second, it could 2.25. I'm just reading what it says.
So what will end up happening is our original, so what's currently included in the budget is $5 million in LAP funds. That was an estimate. What we're proposing is by taking the 24 money, rather than $5 million, we're getting we could get 7.68. If we forego FY24 and take FY25, rather than getting $5 million, we only get 2. So we're really missing out on quite a bit of money if we look to accept 25 and not 24, and I don't think we can accept both.
Yeah, we can't. Yeah, there's 16.25 million for FY25. Project number 1 is getting 14 million. That leaves 2.6, so that would be the only amount we would get. And that was for the full project. So when we submitted for FY25, it was the full scope of the project, not the rescoped project. So it would be 2.6 million towards the even larger project. So it wouldn't even be a starter for us to consider that. So our option would be to do this without LAP funding, or to move forward with a rescope, and if we thought it was feasible, apply for the FY26 funding. That application would go in the fall of 25.
Mr. Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've heard all my colleagues, and I respect everybody's opinion. That's why I'm sitting here being quiet. I understand the concerns. Again, as we've discussed, nobody knows what the future is going to hold with products, cost. But one thing we've got to improve that. So I'm going to respectfully call for the question.
And the motion had been made and seconded. We had additional discussion, so we will take a vote at this time on the motion as it stands to approve a rescope project and acceptance of the 24 funding. And knowing there's always changes to be made and it could blow up and we could give the money back, but the motion is made to move ahead. Okay. So with that being said, we'll take a vote. One at a time, aye or nay. I'll start with Mr. Matthews.
Aye.
Mr. Singleton.
Say aye.
Behringer.
Aye.
Mr. Dellinger.
No.
Mr. Vance.
Aye.
Okay, that's 4-1. The motion carries by 4-1. We have a lot of work to do. Thank for everyone's patience and consideration. This is complicated stuff with lots of impact, lots of figuring to be done, lots of consideration to be given to the neighbors, and to do everything we can to make this an improvement that we all want, a safer road, safer intersection that we all want. And we have to work through that. And I can count on our fine staff and our resources and our council to help us pull this together and make it a positive improvement in a much needed place. Thank you very much for your attention on this. And I'm going to call a close on that portion.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe the motion included the withdrawal of the FY25 LAP application, so if we could just address that to be sure that we've done all the actions that need to be done tonight.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out. It's not crystal clear to me. Did the initial motion include all 3 of the staff recommendation actions of approving the rescope, accepting the 24 funding, as well as withdrawing the 25, the fiscal year 25 application seems to be an integral part of accomplishing what we just said. I think Mr. Matthews made the initial motion.
Made the initial.
Mr. Vance made the initial.
Yeah, I made the initial motion based upon the 3 steps we have faced up here, which included that direct staff with the withdrawal from the FY25 lab application.
your motion included all three of these
Included all
actions?
three of them.
Okay, and your second included that?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon, do you have some input or some?
Oh, no,
I think we're good.
making
yeah.
an observation that we could only have one lap funding anyway, so if we approve the FY '24 at 7.6, then it pretty much automatically withdraws to 25 unless we turn money back in.
Gotcha. So that's consistent. I'm hearing this was consistent with the motion that was made and seconded and voted 4-1 in favor of. Does that answer your question, Ms. Jones? Thank you for adding clarity.
Yeah, just want to make sure we dot all the i's and cross all the t's.
There are many I's and many T's here. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you all for your time.
And with that, we're going to take a 10-minute recess to rejoin here for some committee reports and stuff. So if you can be back here by 7:35, the folks who want to stick around. We're back in session. You can't start a session without a beep. I've learned that, right? Okay. And we'll come back with committee reports. We'll go through the council members to make their reports, and then I know we have an interesting report from the manager as well. So for council member reports, let's start with Mr. Vance. Any report from your end, sir?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to let everyone know that the HR committee will start interviewing for vacancies early January. We have a number of applicants that we're going to interview and hopefully be able to provide you with some recommendations in January.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Mr. Dellinger.
I have no report.
It's not because you haven't been busy, because you have, but we'll get the report next time. Thank you. Thank you. Miss Manager.
Do you know who I am?
Or having a senior moment. What was your name again, Kathy? Please go ahead.
I had the privilege of attending the Gold Star hanging at the Veterans Memorial on Saturday, and I know that a lot of people in our community don't have a lot of personal connection to folks who were in the wars, but we do have that. We need to remember them because they gave sacrifices that are immeasurable, and I really appreciate the efforts of the Veterans Committee in pulling this off.
Thank you for representing us there. Mr. Singleton.
Yes, I want to confirm, agree with Ms. Barnes to the Gold Star seminar. It was very nice, impactful, and when you sit there, of course, and always when you're at the memorial, when you read the names, whether it's on the brick or the names on the monument there, it makes you do a lot of thinking. I had Ms. Cardenas happened to mention about bus servicing going on the weekends and asked me this weekend, and I sent staff an email. Mr. Hodges responded. John, could you tell them to sum up what I said, because the bus, we only have one bus service on the weekend. We have bus service 5 days a week. Can you explain what you told me and what's going to be coming up in 2024?
Yes, sir. So we currently have sort of two main bus lines that serve Garner from Raleigh. One is bus route 7, which has been serving Garner a long time, and it comes down South Saunders is the name of the route you'll see on the bus schedule. It comes through North-South Station and also serves the Walmart facility. That bus does run 7 days a week, and the bus schedule is there if you'd like to see the details there. The bus routes 20, both A and B, are the routes that come down Garner Road and then circulate through Garner Road, White Oak, Timber Drive Extension, Avisboro back up, and is one of the ones that often is used for some of our residents who commute into Raleigh. That one is currently 5 days a week, but Mr. Triesenberg had helped answer the question Mr. Singleton raised, that Go Raleigh is planning to start weekend service on that route in September of 2024, and they'll start providing some additional information for promoting that in around the June of 2024 timeframe. And I believe that is in addition to the service that they've applied for funding through the transit tax funding. And so that'll be when that comes online. So eventually that will allow to have weekend service. One of the things that will need for us to do, though, is to bring back forward the circulator route that we developed and council adopted several years ago, that was developed to sort of run up and down US 70 as a spine in Garner to connect to the current Route 7, which will be the future BRT line, and the routes that are being served by Routes 20 now. So the question was good timing by Mr. Singleton to raise awareness that we need to bring forward and be talking about what would need to be put in place to implement our Garner circulator service that would connect sort of the two parts of town that are served by the Go Raleigh service. And as we've discussed before, that would likely be an application to the transit tax program for some of the operational cost of that. And then we would also have some costs that we would have to incur to operate that. But we would likely partner with our partners at Go Raleigh to operate it for us. So that is the update on the additional service, and then also just being mindful that we'll be bringing forward some discussion of the previously adopted circulator route.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate you answering that and for everybody to hear that, because she asked me the question, I really couldn't give an answer. I really didn't know. And so I appreciate the information. It's helpful because you have a lot of people, blue collar workers, they're not maybe working Monday through Friday. Maybe they're working weekends at White Oak or those particular lady whose family lives in Brownwood Apartments by the Garner Methodist Church, who works at Golden Corral. And of course, it was pouring rain on Sunday, so my church members took her and picked her up later on in the day. But a bus route could get someone close, to that work location. So anyway, that's what spurred the question. So I thank you, John, and appreciate the information. Very helpful.
Thank you. Anything else?
No, sir.
Mr. Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to kind of touch back on the, far as the Veterans Gold Star thing on this past Saturday, the Mayor Pro Tem did an excellent job being master of ceremonies, and we appreciated that. And Ms. Behringer was out there, and she did the pledge. And Mr. Singleton joined me in reading the names, and there were a lot of them going all the way back, and our town manager was there. But our Veterans Committee is going to be doing quite a bit this coming year, so they're excited. We've got a good team there, and but I appreciate everybody's input, and we are a very veteran-oriented community, and so it's just proud to be a part of that, and I appreciate the council and staff's support on what we do out there. That's all, sir.
Fantastic. Great event. And we'll move to manager reports. Manager Dickerson.
All right, thank you, Mayor, Town Council. We'll start off by giving you an update on the Talk of the Town report, and I'm gonna ask Assistant Manager Jody Miller to go through that.
Thank you, Manager Dickerson. Good evening, Mayor and Council again. Mayor, for your benefit, I just want to say a few words about the Talk of the Town. It's a reporting tool that we created about a year and a half ago that we report at for every month for council, typically that second meeting. And it's an opportunity for staff to provide updates and follow up with council members on specific questions or issues that are brought up during our council meetings. It's also an opportunity to share with you the analytics from the Garner Info app, and that app is where council members, residents, staff can put requests in for service or have something looked at and addressed, and that is our way of making sure that those requests get to the appropriate people. We're able to track those issues and make sure they're addressed in the appropriate way. So you will start seeing this every month as part of the agenda packet for the second meeting. So I just wanted to share that with you as part of our overview for tonight. So in your agenda packet is our December report. We have a few updates wanted to highlight for council. There was a question about a brush fire on New Bethel Road, and we were able to confirm that there was a controlled burn at that site. Unfortunately, it caught some surrounding brush on fire as well, and so fire staff, inspection staff with the town is going to work with the county forestry ranger and Garner Fire Rescue to make sure that when those controlled burns are planned, that everybody is coordinated in that issue in case there tends to be another issue that comes out of those types of incidents. So just wanted to follow up with council on that. We talked about buses just a few minutes ago, and Mr. Singleton had mentioned a couple meetings ago about looking into adding some seating at the GPAC. We're excited to share that for an intermediate solution, some semi-seating, which is essentially sort of a two-seat kind of bench, and a trash can be installed at that location. Longer-term strategy would be doing a full shelter on a pad, and maybe even looking at what the appropriate location is for the GPAC site as well. So the short-term solution, we are excited can be installed within the next few weeks, and so be on the lookout for that. Also looking at Affordable Housing Task Force. This is a discussion that council had at their retreat last year, but we also followed up with our housing workshop with DFI. Staff is in the process of looking at other communities and what they're doing in terms of these types of task forces, and our goal is to bring back some examples and recommendations to council at your February retreat on sort of what the next steps on creating a task force would look like for the town. Part of that discussion, we'll be looking for council to give us guidance on the priority for the task force, milestones, and those kinds of things. So more to come on that. Looking at speed calming on Main Street, all the striping and signage for the speed tables has been installed. The next step in that project is to work with Public Works to start blocking off the public parking spaces. and removed the striping to allow for the stop signs to be installed. I know that was a priority project, and then we had the tornado come through, and so Public Works has been really focused on that cleanup effort. So hopefully we'll be able to address that relatively soon, as we had planned. Page 2 of your report looks at the Garner Info Monthly Analytics. This is, as I mentioned, the requests that we get through our Garner Info app. In the last 30 days, we had 25 total requests. Of the 25 requests, 92% of those were completed or in progress in some way, and 83% of those requests have been responded to by Public Works or inspections. And if you look to the left, you'll see the types of requests that were submitted. And it's interesting to always kind of look at these in sort of a seasonal lens. Sometimes during the spring and summer months, it's things like tall grass. As the weather gets colder, it's things like looking at potholes and pavement repairs. And so you start to see sort of a seasonal list of items come up on this on the Garner Analytics report. So with that being said, that is our brief update for this evening, and we're happy to answer any questions the council may have.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions from the council members? Mr. Dickerson, you have some other items?
Yes, I do. I'll give a quick update on the storm cleanup and recovery. So from the Public Works side, they continue to remove vegetation from the right-of-way. Right now, they have a small crew dedicated to the cleanup efforts as other crews return to other tasks. We've seen a decrease in the daily load counts, which indicates we may have peaked, or maybe everything's not out at the road yet, but we'll continue to monitor that. Next steps for us will be to look at some of the damaged trees and down trees in the wooded area behind the homes there, because that is town property, so we'll want to look at that and anything we might need to do there. Thus far, the crews have removed 120 loads, which is estimated at 2,070 cubic yards, and that was from December 10th through the 19th, which is a lot of material. On the inspection side, we have created some permits for some of the addresses that were damaged. Some of the residents, the water utility has been restored, and some of that's to help keep their pipes from freezing if you have a flow of water. We've issued some permits for repairs and also some permits for installation or reinstallation of electric meters. So we continue to work with the homeowners and contractors on getting those back and restored. So, so that's that report. Any questions on that? I'll move to the next one. All right, so I'm gonna turn it over to Assistant Manager John Hodges, and we're gonna walk you through our development portal and show you some things on that.
Thank you, Mr. Dickerson. For some months now, we've been trying to look for ways to enhance the accessibility of development information to citizens. We've been taking feedback from council members, from citizens, from developers, trying to enhance the ways that we project the information out to them. And one of the things that we did earlier this year was launched an interactive GIS development map. And some of you are familiar with it, some of you visited it. On that map, we were adding projects that were in for review as well as things that were recently completed and approved. But one of the things that we were hearing consistently was people were not finding all the information that was associated with it. So with the help of our new GIS staff, we've done some work to enhance that map. And so what I wanted to ask tonight was Jeff Triesenberg to give just a real brief overview of how some things have changed. Want to make sure that council is aware that when plans come in and are deemed complete, we are adding them to this map. So this is the first opportunity for you to be finding things that are there. And one of the big enhancements Jeff will show you is instead of a link to the plans being a little buried a little further down than they were in the past, we've put them right up front for you. So anything that comes in that is complete and accepted by the team is going on this map. We've got some additional enhancements we're going to continue to be making to this, and another update I'll give you right after Jeff finishes, but really wanted to just take a moment for Jeff to show you some of the enhancements and how you could get access to that information to make sure that no one's missing the things that we're putting out for both your use and our residents' use. So Jeff?
Thank you, John. I want to give credit to Alex Bowen, our GIS specialist. He's been doing a lot of work since he's come on board. And just one of those things has been to try to get some improvements made to the development activity map. I think I mentioned before that we have a dedicated page within the website that this map will live on, as well as have the static version of the pipeline. This will also be the page where the new public hearing signs will direct people to via both the QR code and having a friendly URL to come for kind of a one-stop shop for information. And this is the kind of upgraded map. You can, I think I demonstrated last time that you can search on a project name up here, and it can take you to, if you happen to know that information. But one of the biggest things was that it was difficult to find some of the information related to the project. So I'll click on one of these here. In the previous version of the map, we had a field here that would take you, and it would say like view, and then it would take you to our SharePoint site. You could shuffle through the list of projects until you found alphabetically the project you were looking for. Admittedly, that was cumbersome, but at the time we didn't really have a good way around that. Thankfully, the Esri company that sponsors and develops this software is continually making new changes. Alex was able to discover that we had an opportunity to store the maps and the plan sheets with the projects within some allocated cloud space that we already had and wouldn't have to charge additional funds for it. So now when you click on the project, the very first thing here at the top before you see the other information is a link directly to the project map. We are including as many of the pages as we can. Some of them are very voluminous, so we do run into some constraints there. But you're not having to navigate a whole list of folders in SharePoint anymore. The project is just right there front and center for you to click on right at the top. So hopefully that will be something that is of much better value to folks in the community and to y'all as well. You don't have to do as much hunting for the information that you're looking for. One of the other things that Alex is working on is we are trying to come up with a few more categories over here. So before we just had under review and maybe recently approved. Now we've added under construction. And then also, again, thinking to the public hearing signs, we do have annexation public hearing signs, so we're trying to capture that information as well, so that if somebody sees one of those, they can also come to this map service and be able to see what the annexation is all about as well. But you still have all the projects listed over here on the left, so if you do want to scroll alphabetically through them, you can. But again, the simple clicking, if you know exactly where you're at and what project you want, once you get there, just click on the shaded area and the plans will be right there for you to access. And we will be working on, again, these categories over here, seeing if we can further refine that, particularly as we're getting ready to implement our new review system. And so Alex and I are together, we're kind of targeting by your January meeting to have this tidied up a little bit further. But functionally wise, I'm not anticipating any significant changes. I think what we've done already will hopefully help folks find what they're looking for sooner.
Thank you, Jeff. I will note that there are a couple of the colors that you may notice that need to be updated. Alex is doing a great job getting caught up, but until our new system is online, a lot of this is manual. And so there's already some things that you may say, well, I think that's already under construction, or I think that's nearing completion. And we're already working with Alex on a list of those things just to change. So if you see any of the colors that don't look like they're as representative of the state of the project, just stay tuned. You'll see those updated soon. We're also working on coming up with some ways that, in addition to this map, that we can update council when projects do come in. So stay tuned. We'll be updating you with some additional ideas of how we can bring you updates on when projects are submitted, so that if you're not finding them on the map, we can bring those to you as well. In addition to the map, one of the other things that our staff is spending time on right now is reorganizing all of the development pages. We've tried to step back away from the way that we often look at things in our regular local government world and try to envision them the way that a resident might, or someone from the outside might look for them. So we've spent a significant amount of time recently redesigning and remapping how we're going to organize that information. And you'll see a rollout of that in January. So we'll be sure to bring you that sometime in January. And the last thing I wanted to update you on is Jeff mentioned our new development services software. Today was very monumental for us, because after 2 years of development, we actually flipped a switch today to move that system out of the design and development phase into a live version. It is not live to the public yet, but it is live so that our staff can start working on entering active cases in it. Many of our processes were very manual before. They were in old databases, some of which no longer really exist support for them. So this has been a very long project, a lot of hours by many people in our development services team, and Maury Howe, our special projects manager, to get us to this point. And over the next month to month and a half, we're going to be working on finalizing that. You'll also see a rollout from us that'll be going out to the public as to when portions of that system will come online. It will start with our business registration function going out online to our business community first. It'll then roll out some additional inspections and permits, and then we'll also open it up for submitting plans through planning on that. So stay tuned also in January for a schedule of when we're going to be rolling out those new tools. And a really big thank you to all the folks who have spent a large amount of time, significant amount of time over the last 2 years getting us to where we are with our new development services software.
All I can say is wow. Hats off to John and Jeff and your whole team, and Rodney, who's putting this together, particularly with the spin that residents can look at it, developers can look at it, understand what's going on. This is the big picture. I mean, this is science fiction stuff from when I was a kid, clicking on that stuff and seeing things. The documents attached is fantastic. Keep up the work. Please give me a giant monitor on my wall in my office where I can watch this and just look at it as it goes.
Will do.
This is great. You can come look at it. You can come look at it anytime. We'll have snacks. That's fantastic, guys. No kidding. Thank you, bro. Anything else, Mr. Dickerson?
That concludes our reports. Thanks.
Well, you got nowhere to go from there. That was the top of the pile there. And our poor attorney has something mundane to tell us about, I guess, compared to that.
No, I did want to give you an update. I appreciate you approving the assistant town attorney position. That recruitment was posted on the 8th, and it will close on January 1st. And with the HR department, I've already started doing some virtual interviews of some candidates, so we've had a good response and some very qualified candidates. So looking to go through the virtual interviews and then bring in-person panel interviews sometime in mid-January, with the goal of getting somebody on board in February.
Good to have a goal. That's fantastic. Fantastic report. And now I guess we see if there are any other council comments.
I just want to follow up. You said something earlier in the beginning of the meeting about zooming here and zooming there. Then you talked about getting in a rocket ship and flying over a canyon. Now, there's not many of us in here knew what you were referencing. But if you ride up here in a motorcycle in a white jumpsuit that's got red, white, and blue on it, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, baby, I'm gonna jump over this building and a bus. Watch.
So it's called Evil Buddy or Evil Gupton?
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
I wonder how many people caught that when you said that.
Yeah, it's not, that shows your age there.
I was a young boy, but I do remember the event.
Evel Knievel, boy, that was my hero in high school. I crashed many times trying to emulate that. Any other council comments here?
We talk about signs. The street sign at Buffalo Grove Lane and Buffalo Road is down again. It seems to like come down maybe the second or third time. It's like laying, I don't know why, if somebody hits it or if it's being like pulled out, but it's down again. So if someone could look at that.
Buffalo and Buffalo Grove Lane. Okay, just making sure.
Strangest thing. It's like at least the second, third time it's been just laying on the ground on the sidewalk. So that's all.
It's the stop light, the stop sign.
It's a street sign.
Street sign.
This is a street sign.
It must have somebody that's nearsighted or something out there. Geez, well, thanks for bringing that up. If there are no other council comments, I think that we have a matter to consider regarding litigation that will be requiring a closed session. And I'm going to ask the council members for a motion and a second to go into closed section. Is there such a motion?
Mr. Mayor, pursuant to NC General Statute, Section 143318, 11, subset A, subset 3, to consult with the town attorney regarding litigation.
Second.
That was a motion by Mr. Singleton and a second by
Bill Matthews.
Mr. Matthews. Okay, all in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Let's move into closed session, and then we'll come back for the exciting conclusion. Convene in the open session. Is there a motion to adjourn? Oh, no, we get a report from the attorney first. That's right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The town council met with the attorney and other town staff to discuss pending litigation and to give instructions to the attorney on how to proceed.
Thank you. Thank you. Any comments or questions from council members? In that case, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved and second, moved by Mr. Singleton and seconded by Ms. Behringer. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None heard. We stand adjourned.